Hi, everybody. It's Susan, and I want to talk to you about Chiron today. We've got a lot of things to talk about. I'm going to show you a few charts about Chiron's discovery, like we're seeing right now, and explain a little bit about what Chiron represents and how I see it in the natal chart. I've been working with Chiron for maybe 15 years. In fact, I didn't realize that it was an option because it was just always there when I was learning astrology. And especially as you go on astro.com, they just put it there as a figure in the chart. So I just always assumed that Chiron was really important. And I'm glad that I did because I find it is. And as I've been seeing, thousands of charts over the years, I can really see how it shows up in people's lives. So Chiron is an asteroid as well as it's considered a comet as well because it behaves in very unusual ways. It has a very elliptical orbit. When it moves into Taurus, as it's doing right now on the 19th, which is, I'm doing this the day before the Ingress. Um, Chiron is in one of its longer journeys through the zodiac because it's furthest away from the sun. And so Chiron in starting in Pisces, especially in Aries and in Taurus, it's the farthest it gets away from the sun, and therefore it takes the longest to go through the signs. And as it goes in the opposite signs, like in Libra, it's less than a year. It's about a year and a half for Libra. Um, and it varies depending on signs. It goes anywhere from sort of 2 to 4 years for most signs. But here we are in one of the longest journeys. And this is a configuration that also ties in very strongly with the journey of Saturn and Uranus, because Chiron also moves between the two. It orbits in between the orbits of Saturn and Chiron. It's considered a Kuiper belt object, which means that it's way out in the distance beyond Saturn. But because it sometimes approaches Uranus and goes into the orbit of Saturn, it has this really crazy orbit that takes about 51 years to journey around the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun. So it cycles around the sun every 50.7 years. And that means that if you are currently anywhere between 49 and 51 years old, you're having your Chiron return. And that happens to everyone who's lucky enough to live that long. And you get to this point where Chiron comes back to where it is in your natal chart. And what I'm showing you here on the screen is the discovery chart of Chiron. And we only found out about Chiron in the sky thanks to Charles Kowal, who was an astronomer from Pasadena, or at least working in Pasadena, Calif California. And he was able to find Chiron and many, many other of these Kuiper belt objects. And so these are unusual bodies, and they called them centaurs. And what's interesting about the centaurs is that I'm not sure if it worked exactly with Chiron, but from that point on, astronomers and astrologers were working really closely together to name these objects. So there was not always this connection, but at least in this era, there was a strong connection between astrology and astronomy to name the objects and to give them a particular flavor. So Chiron has the quality of the myth of Chiron in the history of the Greek mythology, where Chiron is this centaur who was born of a rape, born of a violent act, and disowned and disliked by his own mother. And so carrying this personal wound of something is wrong with me. Now hold that thought because that's a very important significator for Chiron, but also carrying this sense of deep compassion and awareness of human suffering. And so Chiron was known as a healer, was known as a teacher as well, as the teacher of the gods. And so all of those qualities are baked into Chiron, regardless of where it goes through the natal chart or through the zodiac. And when it comes into Taurus, then it carries this flavor of everything physical. And Taurus is an earth sign, a fixed earth sign, and everything that we need to sustain us is represented by Taurus, whether that be the earth itself or food or, nature, the abundance of nature, but also everything that we need in our modern life, meaning money and the stuff of abundance and the stuff of exchange. And this is Taurus. And our values are also part of that. So Chiron is taking on this flavor of wounding and healing and the dynamic of learning the lessons through that in the quality of Taurus. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. As I said, when I look at a natal chart, I'm really looking at Chiron in the chart because it tells me so much about what the individual is going through in life, and especially what was going on around the time that they were born, which is how I look at a chart. We don't begin at zero. We are the continuum of something that has gone on before us. And Chiron tells us a lot about that family story as well. And here, what we're looking at in terms of the discovery chart is Chiron at 3 degrees, 8 arc minutes of Taurus, and it's retrograde at this point. So this is the 1st of November, 1977. And we are going to find this resonance again next year. So in 2027, we're going to have the anniversary of the Chiron discovery chart. I think it's in June when it comes back to this point, because it'll only be April of 2027 that Chiron comes back into Taurus after regressing back into Aries. And so here what we have is this dynamic of the earth, a recognition of the earth, which is very much a part of the symbolism here of this period in time as well. What I want to emphasize is that there's a lot of astrologers who are talking about Chiron as resonating with major events. And I think that's giving a whole lot of weight to something that requires a team. And with astrology, it's really dangerous to ascribe historical events, particularly, or even a personal event, or even a personal quality to one aspect of the chart or one placement in the chart. Um, a lot of people will, describe themselves by their ascendant or by some other thing. I really don't encourage people to do that. I think we also need to look, when we're looking at mundane astrology, at the whole chart. We want to see what's going on with the other aspects and the rulerships and other dynamics of the chart. So we can't say that Chiron is involved in all the different things of a particular era, and that therefore this is something that we can expect again. There will be events that will resonate and overlap, but I think it's doing a lot of heavy lifting to expect that Chiron is going to be responsible, for example, for the Great Depression and things like this. I think it's a lot to ascribe to one placement, and especially the Chironic placement, when there's so many other things that are going on that actually describe that sufficiently without Chiron. Anyway, so just to keep that in mind, because when we're looking at a chart, we need to really absorb the whole quality of the chart and not one placement of it. So again, I'm speaking about Chiron simply because it's topical and it's the ingress after nearly 8 years of having Chiron in Aries, which moved in there April 2018. And now what we're looking at here is the beginning of this cycle. So the first ingress chart, which I'll show you in a moment, is the beginning of a new cycle of Chiron in a different flavor, but we're just getting a little taste of this. I'm pointing here to the discovery chart because a number of things are very interesting about how this comes into our human consciousness. First of all, the form of Chiron as a glyph. A lot of people call that a key, and of course it does look like a key, like an old-fashioned door key, but it actually is the K from Kowal. So Charles Kowal, as I mentioned, was the astronomer who discovered Chiron. And so this is an honorific. It's showing K for Kowal. And of course, we always look at all these bigger symbols of things, and it's interesting to note that, but that's not the original significator of it. So again, we have to beware of over ascribing certain traits to certain placements and retrofitting our wish or our desire for them to mean certain things based on things that are not always exactly aligned with that. So first of all, what we want to do is look for the ruler of Taurus, and that is Venus. And Venus is very strong here in the house of the future and in the relational sector that she also rules. She's in her own domicile here in Libra, but she's with Pluto, really, really strong, even more powerfully so because it's on the North Node. And Pluto on the North Node with Venus in the 11th house is really a focus on the financial future, a focus on our relational dynamics, the dynamics of couples. And this is all very much part of the Pluto dynamic in Libra for those 10 years or so. Pardon me, 14 years, I think it was, that Pluto was going through Libra. And there we have quite a big signification because Venus is there, the ruler of Chiron at this time, while Chiron is there in Taurus, asking about values. And so this is a really interesting callback to this period of time in November, which spoke a lot about values and earnings and how to overcome things. And it's interesting that in this particular discovery chart, which is again based in Pasadena, it's been given a 10 a.m. time. So I guess that is also with consultation to Charles Kowal. That is in the sixth house. Chiron is in the sixth house of overcoming obstacles and challenges. And Neptune is on the first house. So you could almost kind of sense this feeling of what the heck is that? Neptune, this is interesting how it lines up, by the way, with the US chart and the Sibley chart. So Neptune is just over a degree off conjunction with the US chart. And we have Jupiter also in Cancer, which is what we have not only today as Chiron is moving into Taurus again, but also that's one of the signatures of the US chart, which is Jupiter in the eighth house. The moon is also there, and the moon is square her own nodes. And this is quite interesting too, because the moon is also the exaltation ruler of Chiron. And so that's significant because not only is the moon in a square to both the nodes and to Pluto, but we also have Eris on the south node. And the fact that Eris is on the south node in the fifth house, something about self-expression or pleasure or joy, there's some frustration here. And again, that's part of the theme of that intense period of time in 1977. One of the things that comes through this period of 1977 that's really memorable, I was old enough to remember it. I would have been 11 at that time. And I was just coming into my sort of social and political awareness or consciousness. But this is something that was really key to this period of time, which was the political struggles in the Middle East and also the economic struggles as well that we're coming up with these challenges, especially in the US and around the oil and gas crisis. Sorry about that. I had a doorbell ringing there and a dog barking, so I'm back. Right. So what I was saying is about the Chiron showing us the wound of the time, which is very, very much connected to values and the economy and finances, and the question of enough. Do we have enough? Now, this is another Chiron keyword, which is lack and our relationship to lack and our relationship to what is available to us. And this is something, again, that is emphasized in Taurus. When is it enough? And so here what we're finding in this particular time, at the time of this discovery chart, is that the US at that time under Jimmy Carter, the president Jimmy Carter, had actually raised the minimum wage that day. Let me just check what was that from, you'll laugh when you hear about the minimum wage. I think it was like $2. I wrote it down somewhere. $2.30. I used to babysit around that time. I got $1 an hour. So from $2.30 an hour to $3.35 an hour. So that was raised on the day that Chiron was discovered. However, it wasn't implemented because, my God, these things take time until 1980. So Lord knows that money, when it's there for people, it takes its time, doesn't it? Anyway, but that's an interesting signature I felt because it was very symbolic of this feeling of, okay, there's just not enough and we need to provide more. There needs to be more to be realistic. So that was the minimum wage in the US. There was also a nuclear test at a Nevada testing site on the 1st of November, which calls in this whole environmental issue. And in those days, the whole Greenpeace movement was becoming very, very active. So from, I think it was 1971 or 72, and you had Greenpeace really active and particularly formed around nuclear testing. Now, that's not a Chiron in Taurus thing, but I'm just saying in terms of the Chiron in Taurus symbolism, it has a lot to do with the with nature and our relationship to nature through the Taurian element of that. And this is interesting that on the day it's discovered that the US is testing in the Nevada desert. And and the interesting thing that is also resonating with what's going on now, and I think we will find a few resonances with things that are going on now over the period of Chiron particularly initially in the first instance of the ingress, which I'll show you in a moment, as well as over the 7 years that we can expect Chiron to be changing things in Taurus. And one of the things that really stood out to me was that the UN Security Council proclaimed a weapons embargo against South Africa. So those were in the days where South African apartheid was becoming more and more in everyone's conscious awareness. And again, Taurus representing values and representing the notion of what we value as people, as well as what is the value of a person, what is the value of stuff, and the value of money. It's all of these issues, and that's both inherent to Chiron, but also inherent, especially to the quality of Chiron when it's in Taurus. So I think that weapons embargo against South Africa, which was really a powerful beginning of a bigger movement that took another pretty much 10 to 12 years, against the structure of the apartheid state of South Africa. I think we're going to see that mirrored now with reference to the current apartheid state and ethno state Israel. So I think we're going to see some strong resonance there as the tide has turned against Israel in the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. Which again, it's we want to understand this is not this is a correlation. There's something here that is happening, but it is not a causation. And this is, I think, where often you'll hear astrologers ascribing things to this particular time period, as if it's because of this. So beware of that trap because it's just bringing it into our conscious awareness. So it's not something that's happening because these things are ongoing. And we're just becoming more aware of it. The other interesting thing around 1977 and the whole period of that particular journey through Taurus by Chiron is that Lech Walesa, sorry for my Polish viewers for butchering that name, but that's how I heard it on the news when I was growing up. Lech Walesa he was, again, CIA sponsored, of course, but becoming a very prominent figure in the anti-communist movement in Poland. And he was the organizer of the dock workers in Poland, and they were striking. This is Solidarność, again, sorry for my Polish, but this is the solidarity movement that became so strong, and that was one of the bigger triggers of breaking down communism throughout this era, and especially leading into the 80s, that finally erupted through the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and the period of 1989 with those three Saturn-Neptune conjunctions that really broke down the structures of communism. Valenza won the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, which makes you know then for sure that he's part of the CIA operative. So the Nobel Peace Prize was given to him in 1983. And the whole movement erupted in 1976, which is when Chiron first moved into Taurus in that phase. So I just want to point this out because these are the energies that are really peaking here as Chiron is discovered, so-called, and what we become aware of and what is really strong there. It's interesting also that Saturn, which, as I mentioned, is a really key part of the dynamic of Chiron, is at the critical degree of Leo, and it's ruled by the Sun, which is over in the 12th house, a hidden house, the house of Scorpio here in this particular chart, which is connecting with Uranus, which is the other aspect. Remember, I was saying that there's a movement between Chiron and with Chiron between Saturn and Uranus, and that the two of them, the two are like the boundary of Chiron that it translates between the fixity or the sense of something tangible and real and solid that Saturn represents, material, if you like, and the otherworldly or more insightful, more intuitive, much more cutting edge novelty of Uranus. And Uranus is there with the Sun. And it, in turn, is ruled by Mars, which is in the Sun's sign as well. So they're in an interesting dynamic. It's in a very broad square, but we can still give that a mutual exchange there. And that mutual exchange reinforces both Mars and the Sun. From the ninth house of our road to God, or our awareness of something bigger than ourselves, and also to the 12th house of what is hidden from us. So we're revealing this thing that's hidden from us. And Chiron is broadly opposing the Sun here. And that's also, I think, quite significant at this time of the revelation, let's say, to the world of the existence of Chiron. This was something that was completely unknown. This was something that nobody had any awareness of. And here we are with Uranus conjuncting the Sun in Scorpio, revealing what is hidden. And we have the psychopomp Mercury with that as well, making it even more interesting that Mercury, although it's hidden by the beams of the Sun, it's still under the beams at this degree. It is just coming out of the beams of the Sun at this point. Mercury is part of this revelation story. And again, really makes it very compelling in terms of a discovery chart. A discovery chart is like a natal chart for the event of finding Chiron. And the fact that Saturn is at this unstable degree, at its kind of low point, Saturn is in the opposite sign, it's exiling away from its sign, Aquarius. And um, and the fact that it's there at this critical, sort of vulnerable place really emphasizes this sense of structures being shattered. Things are changing. Things are not like they were. And this is going to be a memorable event, the memorable change. Now, not only was this time period very, very memorable, but of course, discovering Chiron changes our relationship to the cosmos because there's a whole new layer of things that become available to us. Now, those of us who are, let's say, old enough to remember the times before, let's say the 70s and so on, things were quite limited. It was this notion of going to the moon. It's like going to the moon. Martians were like super far out. That was just really unheard of. Going to the moon was the sort of outer limit of what we could identify as space, and everything else was conjecture. And now we're getting into this place of understanding um, that there is something more, there's something bigger and more interesting out there. Chiron is squared by Mars. Now, this is an approaching square, so Chiron is retrograding and Mars is moving forward. That means that they're building up to a square. So again, we have Mars in this really powerful ninth house about the things that we need to learn, things that we want to expand into, how we want to grow and learn. And again, it gives this flavor of a challenge to our sense of what is available to us, what is the value of knowledge, what is the value of what is available to us overall, and who we are as people, who we are as humans. The Chiron in the sixth house is really many layers of representation of healing. The sixth house is all about health and healing, and the fact that it's in Taurus, which is also another healing sign, and that the moon is squaring the nodes, which is showing us that that's part of the thing that needs to be healed. It's the moon in its domicile in Cancer and with Jupiter, so a very expansive emotional healing. The moon in a mundane chart represents the people, and we're looking at a time, this particular time that Chiron has discovered, of crisis. There's a social crisis, there's a financial crisis, there's a crisis of lack, of is there enough? And so again, this is something to keep in mind with the quality of Chiron that we've understood all of these years, but only discovered in 1977. And here what we have with Eris on the south node, this is that feeling of something is missing. We still have Eris, remember, in Aries, so she's at 25 degrees roughly of Aries right now. And Eris on the south node is this thing that feels like it's a frustration. It's something that it's not available to us. And what is the fifth house? It's got to do with our expansion, our self-expression, our desire, nature, what is fun, what is available to us. And it's ruled by this Mars. So again, we have this flavor of Mars that is about needing to expand our sense of what's available to us, or needing to expand what we feel is available to us at a time when there feels like a lot of instability. The instability is also around leadership. This was a really key time in terms of the U.S. Transformation, let's say the phase moving out of the era of the Nixon-Ford era and into the Carter era, which was quite fraught because there was an identity shift. The United States was just 2 years out at this point from real major loss and humiliation in Vietnam. A lot of anger around that, a lot of veterans that were coming home and seeing only despair and anger, not getting the hero's welcome that veterans from the Second World War got, for example, or even the Korean War, because most people didn't know what the Korean War was all about, and so they still lauded their veterans. But the Vietnamese veterans were also the American veterans of the Vietnam War, or what the Vietnamese call the American aggression, is were very badly treated. They were ignored. They were frowned on, and people valued them differently. And I think this is also part of what we're seeing in this chart, that there's this really strong sense of needing to kind of formulate what it means to be home, what it means to be American, what it means to be in this place of value. What is the value? Now, of course, I'm not focusing only on the United States. It's just that this is a discovery chart that is coming through a U.S. Site, a U.S. astronomical site in Pasadena. And so that also carries an extra emphasis because it's centered in California. And also the theme of Vietnam was running through so much of the era. If you're old enough again to remember, Ed Koch, who was the mayor of New York, he was also elected in this week around this time of the discovery. And as a young girl, we used to go to New York because I was in Toronto more or less for my childhood, and we used to go to New York for shopping or for just enjoyment, having weekends or holidays or whatever. And it was a whole New York was an absolute dump in the 1970s. It was a dangerous place. It was not a nice place to be. And it was really Ed Koch that turned that around. And that's a very interesting thing for you as a New Yorker, if you're listening to this or you know New York very well, to observe this phase of Chiron in Taurus as a New Yorker and see how it shifted the dynamic around this time as well. I'm going to switch to the um, I'm going to switch over now to the first ingress in 76, and that will be another way of describing this because Chiron, of course, going into 0 degrees of Taurus here in this chart, it's in the ninth house. It's ruled by Mercury that is retrograde, also in the same sign. And Mercury is retrograding as it will be very soon in about 10 days' time from when I'm posting this now. So Mercury is very, very slow now as Chiron is coming in to its Taurus perch. And Venus, which is ruling Chiron at this time, is sandwiched between the sun and the moon. So there's a new moon coming in here at this ingress that's ruled by this retrograde Mercury. And once again, we have a critical degree Saturn at the end of Cancer at this time, ruled by this moon, which is about to be hidden by the sun. So there's a lot here that again emphasizes this whole story of financial difficulty and challenges that are coming through this period of time. And if we think about the notion of money and finances and how important Wall Street became at this time, I think this chart also helps to describe some of that. In this particular chart, we also have a very, very strong opposition, much stronger than in the November 1st chart of 77, very strong opposition of Uranus and Chiron, which was a very long opposition. So this opposition, Chiron and as I mentioned, the orbit is very, very elliptical. So they have a really long journey together. The Chiron Uranus conjunction was like 1898. And this is part of the opposition phase, which runs from the 60s through the 70s and really held very, very strongly from Pisces all the way through Aries and into Taurus. And so this dynamic of opposition is part of the 60s signature, which bleeds into the 70s. And this is certainly still part of that bigger dynamic of the story. And then we have a square that is a broad square from Mars, but a very tight square from Mars to Uranus, which of course Mars is ruling. And here we find that Mars is approaching a square to the nodes, and Mars is ruling that north node And so again, there's tension in the air and the unsettled feeling. And this unsettled feeling again comes with this feeling of what is going to happen to us. This is part of Cancer. It's coming home. This is very close to the US Mercury in the United States Sibley chart, and Neptune is bang on the ascendant for the United States Sibley chart. So this Chiron story is a little bit different. We have Jupiter on the south node and ruled by this Venus, which is invisible and about to come into this new moon configuration in Gemini, which again is ruled by a retrograde Mercury in her sign, Venus's sign, but also the ruler of this particular Ingress chart. I'm doing this as a universal time chart, so always coming back to Greenwich, so London, basically. And so when we look at this particular flavor, there's definitely some concern around what's available to us, right? Jupiter on the south node, there's something that's lacking. There's something that we need to look at differently. And we will get this later this year as Jupiter is going to conjunct the south node in October, November, December, and even into January, where that emphasis of Jupiter South Node can be very spiritual. It can be something that we require some spiritual understanding because the material stuff is lacking. And the material stuff feels precarious, potentially. Not for everyone, but for many. And so this is something to keep in mind this is part of the theme of this time. I'm just checking my notes in terms of the dates for this. So the 28th of May, as we see on this particular chart, you'll always find the data for the chart up here in the upper left-hand corner of the chart. 28th of May, 1976 was the first ingress until the 13th of October, 1976. So if you're born in those dates, you have this 0 to 1 degree Chiron. And then it came back into Aries, just as it's doing now, as we're going to have in September. And then we have from the 28th of March, 1977, up until the 21st of June, 1983, Chiron went all the way through Taurus. And then it went into Gemini on the 29th of November, from the 21st of June until the 29th of November, and then went back fully on the 11th of April, 1984, into Gemini. And that was the end of the transit. So it did its little in-out between Taurus and Gemini between 83 and 84. And we could say, broadly speaking, that Chiron was in Taurus from 28th of May, 76 until finally the 11th of April, 84. And again, with that little exit point between June and November of 83. So again, think of that if you're born around this time. This is something that will impact you very personally because this will be your Chiron return. It means that you are roughly 50-ish, 49 to 51 years old is the Chiron return. I will be doing a webinar on this, and it's going to be a small group of people because I want to help you with your Chiron return if you have that. It can also be helpful because we'll look at different signs and how they square or trine Chiron at this time and how that will impact your life. And I'll put the details for that below this video so that you can sign up for that. And that will be coming up at the end of the month, at the end of June. My schedule just doesn't allow me to do it in the timing of the ingress. So this is the first ingress chart. And then, of course, we have a second ingress chart. And that second ingress chart is, of course, for 1977. Now, I find the first ingress chart speaks the loudest. It's the thing that shows up really clearly what the signification of this period of time is. But here in the second ingress, it's very, very loud nonetheless. And we have Venus on the south node. And again, we want to remember when people are ascribing economic issues to Chiron going through Taurus, or issues around all these different events that seem to stand out, we can't just say it's because of Chiron in Taurus. It's because of all of the other stuff that is describing the moment of Chiron going into Taurus. And one important thing is that Venus is 12 signs away from the sign that she rules. She's in the sign of her detriment. She's opposite to the sign she rules, which is Libra. And she's on the south node conjoining Mercury. So we know there's some issues here that will again repeat the theme of financial challenges or difficulties, things that are also connecting to our sense of what is relational healing. Now, again, Chiron, remember, is all about healing. And this was the era of the personal development phase, so the late 70s. You had books, all kinds of books around, your erogenous zones, and you had all of these books around Peter Pan syndrome and all these things that were about healing our identity, healing our relationship to ourself. And this is very, very strongly tied with this theme of Chiron. As it was going through Taurus, it was very much when people started to find new and creative ways of examining themselves, giving value to their life experience, giving value to their wounds. And what I find very interesting is that that's also the beginning of this, what we're still living with now, which is a focus on what we're lacking, what we don't have, what we need, what we desire. And those are all the Taurus words. And I'm a huge fan of Caroline Myss. I've been following her for probably 30 years, half my life. And she has this great word which she calls woundology. And woundology is where she ascribes such a huge amount of attention going to how we're suffering. And this is one thing I want to emphasize in this particular video, which is to to use Chiron properly. We want to understand where we may have suffered, where the wound may be, but also not hang on to it, not identify with it. And I think this is part of the challenge of personal growth, which is that we can get stuck in the phase of identifying with problems, identifying with the thing that we don't want, and using that as a big pity party. So you have these ways of pulling people into your orbit based on what is wrong, based on, look at me, oh, poor me, look at my life, look at how difficult things are. And it's not to say, of course, that we don't all go through phases like that. We absolutely do. But the point of Chiron is not to identify the wound and express that constantly. It's in the mythology, Chiron is overcoming the wound, not necessarily by abandoning it or healing it fully, but by acknowledging it's there and carrying on, just moving through it and using that as the stuff of understanding, using it as the fodder for compassion, or sort of the compost for being able to do the teaching and the healing work because we've been there, we've suffered, we had that. But it's not who we are, it's part of our history. And this is, I think, a really good way of using Chiron as we go into this new energy of Taurus, because Taurus is a passive sign, it's a feminine, receptive energy. It's the nighttime placement for Venus, and therefore very passive, very hidden. It's earthly, it's fixed, it's very docile. And that energy should be a caution in the sense that we can get stuck in the quagmire of focusing on the, navel gazing of what is wrong. And I think this also can describe this period of time, sort of 76 through 84, where people did become highly obsessed with all of the different things that are coming through that are wrong. And even if we think about this is the time that Oprah comes up, the Oprah show. In the early days, my mother used to watch this. It was like an afternoon show. It was like 4 in the afternoon or something like this in the mid 80s. I don't remember when it came up, but I was certainly a teenager. And she would interview people about all the things that were wrong. What's wrong with you? That's the whole thing. That's the whole shtick. And again, it's interesting to bring that to your awareness. But Chiron is insisting on our healing. We have to move from that Saturnian sense of this actually happened. This is real. This is coming through my experience, and moving beyond into the Uranian quality, which is overcoming with insight, with something that is novel, something that we understand about ourself, our own self. And of course, we've got this opposition abroad. Of course, opposition, it's fading at this point out of the opposition between Chiron and Uranus. And Uranus here is in, again, this secretive placement of Scorpio. And this is part of the early days of the Chiron placement and the early years of 76 through the early 80s, where we find this energy of secrecy and digging up the dirt and coming forward with the things that are hard and difficult. It's very, very prominent in the story of Chiron at that time. But it doesn't have to be the whole story. So interestingly, we also here at this ingress, second ingress, we also have a moon in Cancer. So moon is very strong here in her own domicile. And we have a very strong sun in Aries, an exalted sun in Aries, which is ruling this retrograde Saturn in the house of the future in this particular chart in Leo. So Saturn again in its detriment, Venus in her detriment, and you know the energy that that holds, especially as Venus in this chart is the ruler of this chart and the ruler of Chiron as well. So we do have a lot to consider in these placements, something that we want to look at in terms of what we hold to be true as opposed to what is an event that we experience. And we will probably be tested over these next 7 years to recognize where we have to take action in this in this chironic way of healing, moving through what is problematic, as opposed to staying with the problem, as opposed to feeling victimized by the problem. Um, I just want to point out too that for those of us who are old enough, that was the year that Elvis died. Elvis died in August 1977. That was a real cultural event as well. People were very moved by that event. I was when as a child, I was a huge Elvis fan. I used to go and buy my 99-cent albums of Elvis. Loved Elvis. And he died of a apparent drug overdose in August 1977. So again, that's also a part of this particular mood of this time, and something that we can, just notice that these are qualities of healing a former time. You know, Elvis represented something that was through the 50s and 60s, very different to what he became in the 70s. And so there was, just like with Vietnam, there was a lot of reconsidering what these things meant. What was the value of these things in a cultural sense? Um, Right. So let me just check my notes. I want to make sure I've fitted in some of these points that I want to emphasize. Oh, with reference to Caroline Myss coming back and that whole Woundology thing, I want to just read a couple of quotes. These will be something I think I'll refer to again. She's really, really clear that this is detrimental to our personal development and healing, which Chiron ultimately, ideally represents. And here, what she says is that we have a tendency to want to reward ourselves for suffering. And so we choose to suffer over choosing our healing. This is a really key thing for me with Chiron in Taurus. If we're choosing suffering as a badge of honor or as an identity or as an excuse for not progressing through life, which I see a lot when I'm dealing with people, there's a need to indulge. And this is also very Taurian. I need to eat. I'm going to have that chocolate cake because I had a bad day. This kind of self-destructive behavior, which is, by the way, part of the chironic unhealed wound. Um, I see Chiron in the natal chart as representing where people sabotage themselves because they haven't overcome certain tendencies. So again, if that's this story in terms of Taurus, the self-sabotage is being stuck on the thing that we lack, being stuck on the inadequacy, being stuck on not being worthy, not having enough, not being enough. And this is something to notice. If that's the case for you, it's blocking your own sense of healing. It's blocking how you can move forward. So, and she also goes on to say, if you choose suffering over healing, then you're also choosing to share your suffering with others as if it's a gift from you. And I'm going to repeat that because I think it's really huge. If you choose suffering over healing, then you will choose to share your suffering with others as if it's a gift. And what we come back to is her word woundology, which is like, as she describes it, especially with reference to the American culture, because it's less so in Europe or certainly not in Asia. where people will almost introduce themselves based on their trauma. And so the trauma stuff comes forward. And I feel like this is the era, the Chiron, the most recent cycle of Chiron in Taurus, where a lot of that comes through. There's a lot of this feeling of identifying with either psychological, physiological, or other types of wounding and bearing one's soul. And that is almost like a replacement for real emotional intimacy. So if I tell you enough data about my life, if I tell you enough about how much I've suffered, can we bond then? This is the kind of OG trauma bonding. So again, just food for thought, because these things are always going to come in and help us see how this particular cycle may shape up and how that might be influencing us too. And we'll see that as we get into the Ingress chart, that it will have its own flavor, but these are things that are also relevant. Um, and also all the more so if you have your natal Chiron here. So noticing things that are missing, noticing things that are lacking. This is Chiron in Taurus. And if this is your Chiron return, this is your offering. This is your gift to yourself to recognize how that has been holding you back, as Chiron does represent the unhealed aspects of ourself and holding on to that, and that being the source of sabotage. Am I not enough? Am I waiting for others to tell me that I'm enough? And this depends in your natal chart which house it's in. So that's that. Let's go on, and we're going to go back in time before we go to today, because the other charts that are very interesting are the original Ingress charts for the second journey of Chiron of the last century. So 100 years ago, Chiron ingressed in Taurus on the 25th of May, 1926. And this was the heyday. Remember that this was the days of the Charleston and champagne flowing and the Great Gatsby, and this was the period of time where people had just extraordinary amounts of money. They didn't, there was a social inequality that's also a very Chiron in Taurus wounding, which is the recognition of social inequality, or the extremes of poverty and wealth. Now, I want to emphasize this is not because Chiron is in Taurus that these are true. It's that these will be a necessary reckoning with that. We need to heal through this understanding, because the extremes of wealth inequality have been there. It's not like they suddenly appear at the ingress of Chiron into Taurus, but this becomes really evident. And these are the heydays before the fall. And again, it will have some resonance with right now, but it's not the whole story, because these are different ingress charts. So 25th of May, 1926, here in this particular chart, once again, we have Venus 12 houses away from Chiron. And that means that she's again in her detriment. She's not in the sign she's ruling, she's in the opposite sign, also called exile, and therefore not really fully able to support this energy of Chiron. And once again, we have Mercury ruled by this Venus, and it coincides also to the Sun being in Gemini. It's as part of the Chironic cycle, which does repeat relatively consistently every 50.7 years. And so just a little bit around 50 and a half years. And so this time we have a moon that is also in its fall. So this is very different now, kind of an ominous thing, because again, remember that the moon is the exaltation ruler of Taurus, and here it's in fall in opposition to Chiron. And that itself is quite an interesting story. And then we have Venus, and she is the one that is squaring the node. So this is the issue. This is the central crisis point. It's the ominous kind of story of, watch out. This is coming up for review. And then if we look again at the notion of the moon and Saturn's ruler being a 12th house Mars, in this case, 12th house from the ascendant of this particular ingress chart, which is London-based. We have Mars in Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter, and Uranus is also in Pisces at the very, very end, almost at the critical degree, and we have Jupiter 12 signs from that. Jupiter is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is retrograde, once again, not in its strong suit, ruled by this Mars, which is ruled by a Jupiter in the 12th house from its sign. So there's a lot here that suggests there's going to be something that is not comfortable. It needs adjustment. It's not comfortable. This is a separating square between Saturn and Jupiter. Things cannot continue the way they have been, which is one of the ways of putting that. And then we have this Mercury in opposition to Saturn, which again is a commercial signature. Things are not going to be so easy. We need to redo something. And Mercury here is squaring Neptune. So there's definitely something going on in this particular flavor of what is true, what is not true, what is based on things that are sustainable or not. And Neptune has just been in opposition from Jupiter, which is moving out of the opposition, but still very much opposed to Neptune. So there's something going on here about abundance, about wealth, about what we have faith in that is challenged on every level, right? So values in terms of Venus, whether it's financial or personal, and or even social. And then we have this Saturn dynamic of retrograde ruled by a 12th house Mars. So it's very uncomfortable. And Pluto is on the North Node again. And here, this is the Pluto in Cancer generation, by the way. So we call that the Great Generation. This is the generation that was connected to both the First and the Second World War, and the sacrifice that they had to make was a big part of that generational theme. Overcoming was just a huge amount, a huge part of that theme. And here with Pluto on the North Node, yet again, as we've seen in other charts, um, this is really explosive. It's really intense. So there's something massive that is changing socially, changing nationally. Keep in mind again, this is the reference to the US 8th house, where the United States has a stellium. So quite a big deal for the United States, which was the trigger point of the Depression. The United States Wall Street market crash was the trigger point for the Great Depression. And in a way, when I was talking earlier about the dynamic of the late 70s, part of that dynamic was the shift between the hippie, the hippie framework of peace and love and understanding and trying to find healing, no more war, and all of these other things. And then the Saturnian reality of life coming in, like in the hippie era in the 60s and early 70s, you weren't supposed to trust anyone over 30. That was the kind of thing. And it was all about sharing. It was the very much a countercultural dynamic, which was very, very much the Pluto Uranus conjunction in opposition to Saturn um, and Chiron. So if you're born from late 1965 to very, very early, let's say up to February 67, like myself, you have Pluto and Uranus conjunct in Virgo in opposition to Saturn um, Chiron. And I need a coffee today, I think. And that dynamic is part of the flavor of the 60s. It's what made such an extreme tension for change, the necessity of change, the recognition of that. And then that pattern continues in the 70s. But then what shifts as Chiron in the era, let's say that Chiron is moving into Taurus, is that greed starts to overcome the fear of lack and the need to structure finances, the need to feed the kids, the need to buy stuff, which was, of course, easy to ignore when you're a 19-year-old hippie at Woodstock or whatever. And then all of a sudden, you have all these people who end up in corporate jobs. And the big sort of meme of the day of the late 70s was people were selling out. So the hippies were selling out. Bob Dylan was selling out, going with an electric guitar. All these things, this is this part of this shift in values and a need to recalibrate based on what values are changing. We will be going through this same thing. And here in this particular ingress, we're seeing the same kind of thing, a shifting in values forced upon people by something that is looming but not yet clear. Here we have a T square with this opposition from Mercury to Saturn and then the Neptune, which is clouding the judgment. Jupiter has just moved out of the grand fixed cross, And this is there's a breaking point at this point where there's a tipping point away from what is excessive, what is extreme, and then going towards the tumbling down of the economy and the stock market crash of 1929, October 29. So let's look at the second ingress chart for 1927. Oh, by the way, I wanted to mention that this particular ingress of Taurus, this was from the 25th of May, 1926, till the 20th of October, 1926. And in that time, there were a couple of events that I think we're also going to see come up as issues now with this Chiron ingress. And that one of them is the Lebanese Constitution was established. That was the 23rd of October. And this is very, very pertinent now because Lebanon is being under it's under attack by Israel, and it's people have been pushed to the north. There are people who have lost their lives. Almost 20,000 people at this point have lost their lives in the Israeli attacks on Lebanon over the last couple of months. And this is going to be something that we're looking at, I'm quite convinced, that is so strongly resonant with the Lebanese constitution. And then this will come forward again as we go into 2026 and 27's Chiron and Taurus journey. The other interesting thing is that there was a coup d'etat in Portugal, and that was the beginning of a dictatorship that led to the Salazar regime that went on until 1974. So there can be events here that really have a long lifespan. Again, it's not because of Chiron, but it's resonant with these with this journey of Chiron. Because again, we're looking at issues of what is available, what is the values of a people, the values of society, and our personal values, as well as what is sustaining us. And my favorite thing, then I think this actually describes Chiron in Taurus probably the best, is that Winnie the Pooh was published, and that was published October 14th, 1926, just 4 days before just a week, let's say, before Chiron moved back into Aries. And Winnie the Pooh, with Christopher Robin and Eeyore, and of course Pooh and Piglet and all the characters, it describes this beauty, the flavor, let's say, of Chiron in Taurus so lovely, so beautifully. And I can't find my words today. I definitely need that coffee. And so A.A. Milne was the author of that, and he based this book on the life of his son, Christopher Robin, who was the main character in the book, and of the gentleness of life in the innocence of a child and the sustenance. Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, always talking about food, always wanting to eat a little something. Pooh always liked a little something around 11 o'clock. And so it's this gentleness and this healing quality. And if you go back, there's a beautiful book called The Tao of Pooh and The Day of Piglet, which is the second volume of that. This would be great reading during Chiron in Taurus because Pooh is very wise, and what he's showing is compassion and gentleness and understanding. Lots of patience. These are all Taurian qualities, and the healing quality that he brings. And Christopher Robin, who is always boosting him. Pooh's, remember, lacks confidence. And Piglet is quite feisty, but they all have their own little wounds, their own little challenges. Piglet is very small, and they all help each other. Now, Eeyore would be the unhealed chironic wound. Oh bother. It's like nothing is good, nothing is okay. Eeyore is literally a donkey, a stubborn donkey stuck in the mud. And we can use this as a metaphor for the Chiron in Taurus era. And again, I really encourage the Tao of Pooh and the Day of Piglet, which is just such a fantastic volume. I have them in storage here. I need to get them out of storage. There's this slowness, this gentleness, this compassion, this quality of healing just by reading these books. And the story of Winnie the Pooh, the very first one, I think is the most precious. And Pooh has this quality of openness to understanding and openness also to misunderstanding, and for all of that to be okay. And I think this could be one of the fantastic healing messages of the Chiron Taurus energy, and I found it absolutely brilliant that it was actually published during the first ingress here. in 1926. Now, I'm not going to go back and back and back in time. You can do all kinds of explorations on your own. I just thought these were some things that were very interesting to compare to our current time. This is the second ingress of 1927. And that's where things start to really show where there's real challenges showing up, real difficulties. Things are starting to, the warnings are coming unheeded. The markets are heating up from this point for about a year and a half or two, where the markets are very overheated. We see this now very strong Jupiter in its own sign. Uranus is at the critical degree. Now it's at the end of this journey through Pisces, through the zodiac itself. And here we find Uranus is squaring the nodes, and so is the Sun and Eris squaring the nodes. So we see that there's a precursor for some real issue. Venus is with Chiron at this time. So this is the theme. This is the big event. And in this particular chart, it's coming with the flavor of the future. This is the house of great gains. It's the house of what is going on coming down the pipeline. What's my dream, my hope, my wish for the future? And in this particular chart, we're seeing that Chiron with Venus is showing, yep, there's something that we need to batten down the hatches. We're going to need to take good care whatever this future holds. There's healing to be done around our values. There's healing to be done around money, even around women, because of course, Venus, Taurus, Venus, Libra also connects to women's issues, and that was a very big part of the 20s as well. The role of women, the women's issues were very, very powerfully connecting to in this moment in time. I also want to emphasize that this is the moment in this particular period of time and into the 30s when propaganda started to really go off the charts. This is when it started to be used from the First World War on, and that could be something that is worth paying attention to also now, in terms of what we value and what we're being told to value. Mars is in the 12th house again in this particular chart, and it's not very happy in Gemini. It's ruled by uh, a Mercury which is retrograde, and it's moving away from square with this Mercury, and there is also a separating square between Jupiter and Mars. So this is a big deal. This is a enlarged something to focus on. The Mars in Gemini, this is the US Mars. This is the Mars return of the United States. And again, this is why it resonates so strongly with the issues, the financial issues that were specifically connecting to the Wall Street crash, and now the stock exchange. What do you call it? Midheaven of the stock exchange is at 0 degrees of Aries. So here we have Aries now at that point, just moving in. So this is Aries is a century, more than a century in Aries. We can see that she's only at 25 degrees with the sun exalted, but there's some frustration here. There's some real concern, and we're just about to have a conjunction. There is, I use out of sign conjunctions. There is a conjunction here with Uranus on Eris. So something really interesting that is triggering this moment in time that is speaking to a need to look at values, the value of money, the value of stuff, the issue of lack with new eyes. We still have this very strong connection also with Pluto in this dynamic. Pluto is retrograde here and in a trine with Jupiter, but it's backing away from the trine. It's in a trine with Mercury, which it's holding very strongly at this ingress. And that again is these notions of abundance and the economy and exchanges of all kinds, and Pluto in the sign of family, in the sign of nurturance, in the sign of what is even the nation, for example, is showing us something that we need to pay attention to here. This is a story of caution, a cautionary tale. Equally, we have Saturn, and it's ruled by this Jupiter, very strong ruling by Jupiter. And it's with the moon. The moon will have just been the day before conjoining Saturn at the time of this ingress, just hours before. And Saturn is retrograde once again. And here we're finding a trine from Saturn to the Sun from the sixth house of challenges and obstacles. Now, it's interesting because we have a kind of an unusual exchange here. where Saturn is, in opposition here to Mars, or it was previously in opposition from Mars. But Saturn is also the 12th house. It's the 12th house is the house of the joy of Saturn, where it clarifies things, it consecrates things that are a little bit nebulous and not clear. And Mars is the joy, rather, the sixth house is the joy of Mars. And so they're in a very interesting exchange here, but not comfortable. Neither of them are comfortable. They're both in an awkward position. And so I think that's quite interesting too. The fact also that the moon is in a trine to Neptune, which is also retrograde. The outer planets are frequently retrograde, so that it's in itself is not exceptional. But the fact that the moon is in a trine to Leo at the time of this ingress, again, is another caution that things are not what they appear to be. And this is the second house of money, values, possessions, and everything that supports us in this particular chart. So Chiron is already part of the dynamic of this chart, which is difficult. It's not the reason that things become difficult, and that's what I just want to point out, because I'm hearing so often in other presentations that Chiron is going to describe all of these things. No, it really does depend on the circumstances of the ingress chart and also what else is happening. So we're not going to get the same exact flavor, although we can expect certain things to materialize in this way. So here we have Chiron now moving in its first ingress, which will last until the 18th of September. So Chiron will retrograde back again, back onto the critical point of Aries, that unstable 29-degree point, which is very much a flavor of many of these ingress charts. Notice that this instability is baked in to what we saw it with Uranus, we saw it with Saturn, and here with the Chiron retrograding in September, we're going to get that again, that instability coming back, which is what we've been experiencing really over the last few weeks up until this point of the ingress on the 19th of June. This is just the day after I'm preparing this for you. The moon in this case playing quite an important role as the exaltation ruler of Chiron, also trining Chiron, Chiron trining the south node. And with this moon ruled by a very slow Mercury, Mercury is in a very interesting, what we call a mutual exchange, because it's not in a classical aspect with each other, but a mutual um, uh, generosity, we call it, not an exchange. And Mercury is ruling the moon is ruling Mercury. Mercury will get to 26 degrees and on the 29th of June back away in retrograde. So it's very, very slow. It's already well within its shadow phase. That started on the 12th of June. So Mercury is well within its shadow. It's going to come back over these degrees. And the fact that it's ruling the moon and the south node here, which is part of the configuration of Chiron, is important because, again, the moon represents the people. If we're looking at it from an individual place, then of course it's our memory, it's our concept of our emotions, our field of awareness. It's the mind, the nature of the mind, our physical well-being, our physical body, the mind-body complex, you could call it. And here, although it's in a trine to Chiron, the fact that it's on the south node depletes the moon. Those are enemies. Traditionally, the moon and the nodes, the sun and the nodes, these are enemies. And here what we find is that Uranus, again, the part of the story of Chiron, is in a square to this moon within, it's a partile square, it's intense. And so there's going to be a shakeup societally. And again, in terms of with Mercury representing the mercantile or the commercial aspect of things, and with Venus here in Leo, ruling the Chiron in Taurus. She had been she ingressed, when was that, on the 12th of June. So just as Mercury passed its shadow, Venus ingressed into Leo, but this is really broad for a square. However, Venus is in a really strong opposition, still holding this opposition to Pluto. And that's important because even if we give it a really wide margin, we can still consider that that's impacting Chiron, because Chiron and Pluto will be coming in to a tighter square as Pluto goes backwards. And then that will repeat in 2027. So just things to notice, things to pay attention to. But we can't describe this as fully as a square. But Venus again is in this place of not really fully uh, empowering this Chiron ingress. The sun is coming to the end of Gemini, which is ruled by this very slow Mercury. And from the sun, Mercury is the second house. So that, like symbolically, from a point of the derived houses. So if we go from the placement of the sun, Mercury is second house from the sun. And again, referencing something to do with money. And that's where we find Jupiter about to change into Leo, just as the sun will itself change on the 21st of June. So Sunday, from this point on, is the solstice, the June solstice, or in the northern hemisphere, the summer solstice. And and that is where we get the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere and the shortest in the southern hemisphere. But this is just a week away, roughly 10 days away from Jupiter entering into Leo along with Venus. So what we're preparing for here is unstable. This is what I'm trying to communicate. It's not stable. It's not really something we're clear about. We do have this minor grand trine here, the mini grand trine, minor grand trine that is showing up here. Bisextile is another way of calling that, with the trine really strongly forming here. And that's the theme of all of June and July for us here. This is very, very close to exact. As it comes into July, it becomes really tightly exact in the first half of July, and holds a pattern going into the second half of July, which will include Jupiter at those same degrees. So we're moving into new territory with reference to society and how we're changing socially. This is something we've never seen with Chiron in Taurus before. It's never been seen before, full stop. But the fact that it's part of this moment in time as Chiron is changing signs and showing us that there's some kind of wounding around our values, wounding around our own self-worth, our own worth as a person. This is part of what is being shaped by society and by our choices, our social choices, or the choices that are being made for us without our agreement or even for knowledge. So these are the things I think we're going to be contending with. Once again, we have a Saturn that is not in strong dignity. Remember before we had Saturn in Leo in the 70s. This dynamic of Saturn in Aries is similar to Saturn in Leo. It's a Saturn, in this case, which is in its fall. Saturn in Leo is in detriment. It's in the opposite sign from the sign it rules. Here, it's in the opposite sign from the sign that it exalts. So we call that in fall. And so it's a Saturn that is frustrated, and it's ruled by Mars, which itself is in Venus's sign, sluggish and slow in Taurus, very calculating, needing to make great efforts, but can also make great efforts in terms of progress financially. And this Mars is also in a sextile with Mercury, and is going to, no, it won't make the sextile with semi-sextile with the Sun. It is going to make the semi-sextile with the Eris that it rules. And the fact that Uranus and Chiron have been pretty much in a semi-sextile for the last sort of 15 plus years is also part of their dynamic. Remember, I was pointing to earlier that they have this dynamic of opposition, which is very long through Pisces and into Aries. Sorry, was it Pisces into uh, it was it was Aquarius into Pisces, and that opposition then starts to break down. And then when that starts to break down, then we get this really interesting dynamic of the squares, and then this dynamic of the semi-sextiles. And this will last a long time. This will not take shape. It will not come to a new cycle until 2050 something, or 2044, I think it is 2044. Um, we'll talk about that. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. There's too many things to keep in mind here. What is interesting about the previous ingress, the two previous ingresses, so the 1926 ingress 100 years ago, is that Albania, so we had the Lebanese borders. Remember the Lebanese constitution, sorry, not the borders, the constitution was established at that time. But here we also have the Albanian borders delineated in 2026. That was on the 26th of July, 1926. And it's very interesting that in the last month, there has been an awareness of a previous deal that was done, I think, 2 years ago with Jared Kushner and his team of property developers who have overtaken a nature reservation in Albania without the awareness or approval of the people. And in fact, legislation had to change to enable that project to go through. And the idea would be that there would be some kind of hotel and community using this pristine land in Albania. And that has been the stuff of legendary opposition now over the last couple of weeks as people are becoming more and more aware of it by social media. So I think that story is going to be something that comes to a head, even in this first ingress of Chiron into Taurus as of the of this 3 month phase. And we'll do another I'll do another video about the second ingress of Chiron in Taurus in April of 2027. It's getting to be very long, much longer than I had anticipated, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind as we are personally being challenged. And this is very much the symbolism of Chiron as it dances between Saturn and Uranus. And here we see that dance very, very clearly. We're asked to grapple with how we are working with the material world, with the physical, with the three-dimensional aspects of life, the restrictions, if you like, of life, and with what is possible, how we can change what is perhaps unexpected ways of change, dealing with what comes insightfully or suddenly, unexpectedly. And this is the bridge that Chiron is making. So healing our value, understanding the value of values is really important. A lot of times people in recent decades have thrown away traditional religion, have found a lot of issues with traditional religion, of which there are no doubt many, but they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And the values that underpin religion or that underpin these structures, which fundamentally boil down to the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or do or don't do to others as you wouldn't do or you wouldn't want done to you. That dynamic is what we need to focus a lot of our attention on at this time, because we are going to be challenged with fear, with greed, and with dynamics that threaten our capacity to feel abundant, just as what was happening in the late 1970s, and just like what was happening in the late 1920s and even into the 1930s. So note that from 1977 or 76, I guess we could extend that initial ingress till 1984, things improved. So there was difficulty, there were challenges. And what was happening then in 1984 is that the economy really bounced back. But what happened in terms of the bounce back was that greed overtook everything. And this is when you get a corporate dominance. This is when Chiron goes into Gemini, the sign of business, and everything starts to incorporate. And Chiron moving into Gemini then in the 30s was about fixing the damage, let's say, around the depression and the economy and the lack by going to war. And these are also things that we can expect to repeat, I think, as aspects of this time that we're in. War is never what it appears to be. It's never for the reason it appears to be. And it often is seen as a solution, a distraction, a way of generating economic growth, but it's also an extractive thing. This is something that we have for many of us, in our experience, in our memory. And one of the things that was really strong about that post-Chiron and Taurus era was the impact of Wall Street. And again, thinking of the impact of Wall Street in the era of Chiron in Taurus before, as in the Reagan years, the second or the most recent Chiron in Taurus was really all about that corporate greed and about the economy. This was the same with the Thatcher years. It was the exact same thing: crush the workers' movement and instead replace that with privatization. And this can also be something that we're seeing again this time. It doesn't have to be the same, but it will be rhyming very, very strongly with what's going on now. As I've said many times, if you've been watching before, this mini grand trine and this basket formation that we will get, especially as Jupiter moves into the fourth, fifth degree of Leo in July, I don't necessarily see that as a positive shift. There's going to be a flow, there's going to be something that is changing, no doubt. And I would desperately love to be wrong, but as I see the direction of flow, it can be pretty gruesome what's coming along passively along many, many lines in ways that we don't actually have a vote or a say or an element of control over. So these are times where we have to come back to our values. We have to come back to what stabilizes us, putting our feet on the earth, growing our own food, being in touch with what is real, being in touch with what provides comfort, which is again these Taurian words, with which whatever heals our sense of lack, the sense of not enough, whether it be personal sense of I am not enough, or the material, which is again very Taurian, the material world, the earthly dynamic, the earth quality, the fixed earth quality of Taurus, very much about stuff, food, comforts, and the nice things. And especially as it's a bling bling Venus in Leo that is ruling this, I think we need to be careful not to get too focused on that, because when we then feel that there's a lack of that, we will potentially drop our values, we will not live according to values, and things will go wrong when people do not remember their basic values. So this is something to keep in mind. I think it could be a really good practice in the course of the year ahead, as Chiron is going to go back between now and April 2027, back and forth between Aries and Taurus, where we remember what it means to identify as a person, who we are as an individual, our own worth, and then what are our values and how do we express that? How do we live up to that? What are the things that are worth fighting for? So that excess that we saw in the late 20s or the mid 20s that led to the collapse in the late 20s that lasted really from 1929 to 1939. So again, we can't say this is specifically about Chiron and Taurus. There's an overlap for sure. And then the disillusionment of the hippie movement and the idealized vision for society, the utopian vision that then collapsed as Chiron went into Taurus again, and that greed and money took over once again. And the issue of values needs to be healed. It needs to be questioned. Our value as people. Remember that Wall Street, this movie came out. It was made in 1986, came out in 1987, and that was a brilliant summation, let's say, of the transformation from the 70s into the 80s, where all of a sudden greed and corporate takeovers and money above all else were symbolized in the figure of Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas. And that was one of the quotes from that film. Who's the guy that was the young guy? Um, this is terrible. It's coming to me. It'll come to me. Big star. Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen. Um, he says, "How much is enough, Gordon?" And I think this is a good question for us collectively to ask and also individually to ask, how much is enough? And am I looking in the right direction? Pick up your copy of Winnie the Pooh or The Tao of Pooh and the Day of Piglet and really get in touch with that. And it will help you, I think, through these times rediscover the value of the fundamentals which Taurus represents, because that darker Taurian quality, that resonance of Taurus, is very focused on what is not there until that chironic wound is healed, focused on lack, focused on competition and comparison. Um, I don't think we're going to see the real major challenge financially until we get Saturn moving in to conjoin with Chiron and then square Pluto. And so there will be this tension of a square with Pluto for quite some time, with Chiron Pluto through 2027 into 2028. And then Saturn joins in April 2028 and then emphasizes that tension. And I think there is where we're going to find a lot more of the deeper issues, the more longer lasting issues. Definitely something to prepare for, and to also keep checking in. What are my values? What am I going to base my future and my self-worth on as I go forward in this era? So lots to work with here. We do, again, have this sextile from this is a building, story for the whole summer and into 2027. This innovation, the potential for innovation, potential for new things to come. Let us not just go merrily, merrily, merrily. Life is about a dream. We need to take action individually to avoid things getting out of control. So we see a lot of stuff about AI or large language models, which is a better way, I think, of describing it, because it's pretty very little intelligence in that, artificial intelligence. And what we're realizing now, and I think this could be a big theme of Chiron going into Taurus this year, is that the AI promise far exceeds the reality of that. And we're going to see that coming very, very soon down the pipeline, if not this period in the next 3 months. I think we're going to see that people are realizing that the whole thing is an overblown promise that is not really serving much. It's creating a lot of unnecessary stuff, and Chiron in Taurus will help us to see that there are things that are necessary and of value, and AI slop is not part of that. You see AI being used in ways where incorrect information, where nonsense is being created constantly, loads of games, so many videos of just simple nonsense. And we need to pull ourselves back into Winnie the Pooh mode. Be Christopher Robin at the side of the river and contemplate and recognize how beautiful every moment is. What was it? Is it Piglet asking Pooh, what is your favorite day? Or no, what is today? I think it was. Piglet says, Pooh, what is today? Um, and no, Pooh asks Piglet, what is the day today? And Piglet says, today. And Pooh says, oh, it's my favorite day. This is Chiron in Taurus. So keep that in mind as we go through this phase of Chiron in Taurus. Come right back to this beauty and simplicity, which is abundance, which is our birthright, which is who we actually are. And then you'll find that you actually have a lot that you can work with as we go forward into, no doubt, difficult times. There will be some challenges. So just for the data, Chiron will retrograde on the 18th of September, goes back into Aries, and it stays up to 27 degrees of Aries, goes into the 26th degree, 26, 27 degrees of Aries, but will come back through again. And it will be on the 14th of April, 2027, that it finally comes into Taurus. I will do that separately when the time comes. We will do another Ingress video, but this is, I think, the one that speaks the loudest to the theme of the period of time to come, the longest journey of Chiron through the zodiac over these next 7 years. And so I wish you well through this, and we will go sign by sign and see how everybody fares as we go one ascendant, sun or moon at a time, starting with Aries. All right, for Aries, sun, moon, and rising. And to understand more about that, read the description box below where I describe what each represents in terms of the perspective of the transit. So for Aries, sun, moon, and rising, this is happening in your second house. Taurus enters your second house on the 19th of June, and it will stay there until the 18th of September. And this is all about your money, your worth, your income, your valuables, your possessions. It can be everything that supports you in the form of food, anything that nurtures you, your family, the connections you have with your family, the money that you earn, and the things that you accumulate. Pardon me, and the value that you give those things. You might derive your value from those things. And if that's the case, then this would be something to learn from in the next 7 years that Chiron is going through this part of your chart. Your ruler is there with Chiron at the time of this ingress. And that makes it even more important for you symbolically. It's your Mars is your ruler, and it's in the second house. So there's something already brewing about money that happened even before this Chiron ingress. And there's something here for you to learn about your self-worth or your value or the value of what you do and how you do it. Now, Venus is ruling all of this from the fifth house. Your fifth house is your self-expression. It's how you create, it's how you express who you are, what you represent in this lifetime. It can also reference children as well. And so there may be something here with reference to your creative output. The second house is also your voice. It's the voice that you give to things. It's your sense of how you vocalize things, but also it's your expression, meaning that it's how you vote in a way. If you think of how you put your value on things, and Venus is showing you that part of this story needs to be creative. It needs to come through who you are. And because Venus is ruled by the sun in your third house of expression and your communication and your choosing and your willpower, this is also part of this bigger feature. Mercury is ruling that sun as well as Uranus in the third house for you from the fourth house. And Mercury is very slow right now. So Mercury retrograde will actually represent a lot of the story of what Chiron is telling us between now and September, because the Mercury retrograde phase is 10 weeks. So once Mercury entered into Cancer at the beginning of June, it actually is going to stay there until about the 10th of August, which is just a month shy of Chiron being in your fourth house, of Chiron being in your second house, Mercury being in your fourth house. And because Mercury is ruling Uranus and the sun from your third house, there's something here that represents an emotional choice or a choice that is based on home and family or where you live. Jupiter is also there. I'm going to do a separate video on Jupiter, and I will also do a separate video on the Mercury retrograde. So we'll bring these things back in. But it's just to show you that there's a tie-in here with your degree of security, your emotional security, your psychological security, your sense of home, what that feels like to you. And Venus is asking you to show up in a way that's unique and expressive as a reference to the second house of your values and your self-worth. The second house also is everything to do with your face, everything to do with your jaw, your mouth, your neck. Um, Perhaps there's something specific about those items that will come up. It could be anything to do with the appearance that you have or the way that you're dealing with your teeth, for example, or issues that might come through any physical features of the face. But it also is food and diet and whatever you consume, and that consumption can include drugs and alcohol. So this would be a good time also for you to really examine things that might not be supporting you. And that's especially true while Saturn is in your first house until April 2027. And sorry, 2028. We don't get off that lightly. So till April 2028, Saturn is in your first house. And so that's going to also help you restructure who you are and how you show up in life at the same time as Chiron goes through your second house and heals a lot of that notion of your self-worth and your value. This is in no way an implied sense that you should do anything or fix anything. It's not to say that that has to be done. It's that things might come up around that or something in your awareness is coming up around that. And that can include family. Second house is also the money that you earn. And with your ruler there, especially, and the Mars ruling the eighth house across the way, which is other people's money, money that you get from passive income or relational dynamics or clients, for example, there may be something here about having to work harder for your income, working more specifically towards a financial goal or changing the way that you see all of that. Had a really interesting chat with my acupuncturist the other day here in Brussels, and he was saying, I don't want money. I'm not interested in a big fat career. I just want to live. I just want to have my life. Now, this can be something that appeals to you, Aries, as well. Maybe there's a sense that you've been pushing yourself so hard, especially as Chiron has gone through your first house and you've been repositioning your own sense of self and your self-worth, on top of the fact that Saturn has been there as well. And this will be part of the story that continues right through till April 2027. So we're not completely finished with that story, but having Chiron in your second can really be an opportunity for you to heal any wounds around your self-worth or around what you feel like money is to you, the value of money and the value of values, which is what I'm saying in terms of the sense of this transit. We need to come to a place of understanding our self-worth. And when we're clear about our self-worth, then we're really clear about our values as well. They tend to go hand in hand. So this is definitely very important to you, and you can listen to the introduction if you haven't already to hear more about that because it will resonate quite strongly with Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. So Venus is also trining Neptune from the fifth house to your first house. So there may be something here that you have as a creative output or input or something that you want to design in a way that is coming through your imagination. I always say with Neptune in the first house, it's a good idea to be really clear who you think you are as you're appearing to show up in the world, as you come to who you are presenting yourself to be, because often there can be a certain amount of acting involved when Neptune is in the first house. Like I'm pretending to be happy, I'm pretending to be so and so. And here with Venus in a trine from the fifth house, which is also about how we show up, I think this could be something to take note of. Am I being sincere? Am I being honest? Am I being in a way that somehow separates me from other people? Am I separating myself out from relationships? So Venus rules your relationship sector as well as your money sector. Um, or is this something to do with my love life or my children? The dynamic around financing that, or the value that I put into that, or the value that I feel is coming to me through those things, through the people that love me, or through whom I love, and my children, and the way that they're expressing part of who I am in this world, in this lifetime. Venus is opposite Pluto at this time, which is in your 11th house, has been there for a long time already, for over 3 years by now. And, and so there's something of a tension there between this wanting to show up in a particular way and a feeling of what's possible in terms of either social restrictions or social changes or your peer group or your friends, the people you pal around with, and also your vision for your future. This is the house of hopes, wishes, and dreams. The 11th house is also the house of gains, what you get from what you put out, what you contribute. And so a lot of this is being rethought of this remixing, let's say, of how you yourself show up because you've got both Neptune and Saturn in your first house. It's a really big theme for Aries right now. And then Uranus is trining Pluto from the third house and sextiling Venus from the third house as well. So there's a lot of potential for creative self-expression, choosing differently, choosing based on what you truly value. But this doesn't necessarily have to happen today. It's a process of over the next 7 years of how you're going to be expressing your self-worth and your values in all of that. Equally, you've got the Moon South node in your sixth house, and the nodes are about to shift. So what is it, 5 weeks from this point, the nodes will actually shift. I'll do a separate video on that. And you've got the moon in a square to Uranus from your third to your sixth house. And there's something there about how you show up in the minutia of every day, how you contribute in terms of the actions of every day. This is especially true for the third house, but also the sixth house, which is your schedule, your routine. Third house is your everyday busyness. It's business as well as busyness and and also what your how you motivate yourself, like how you reach out and motivate yourself. And here again, as we see that it's ruled by both of these houses for you are ruled by Mercury, which is about to retrograde. You're contemplating something that needs to change, and this will be part of the Mercury retrograde theme for you over through the month of July and into August. So you're really preparing for something that's quite different, but I think it's for sure early days to know how that all will shape up. But if the focus is on you and you're in the driver's seat here, and it's about your values, it's very literally something that's going to impact potentially your relational dynamic. If you're in a couple, for example, who earns what, who pays for what, um, are you getting money from an outside source? Do you have to earn more money? How are you organizing your finances? How are you investing your money? So Venus in the fifth house, ruling the second house, is also speaking a lot to investing money. Um, it's gambling, same thing. So notice that again, where you feel you are ready to focus more on your future and how you might want to invest money, or are you doing wise things with your money? This would be a good time to really question all of that. And it's really the whole month of June because Mars is still in your second house all the way through June, and then Mars moves into your third house to square the nodal axis. So your choice point is very loud here. It's very strong. This can also be, again, as I said, with relationship to your family and maybe even with reference to your early childhood or how you've been relating or how you feel supported by your family. And if that wasn't there for you, or if there's something around that that you were made to feel less than, especially if this is your Chiron return, this will be part of that story, then this is a time where you can heal that wound and come back to yourself, value yourself through your own lives, and start to recognize the dynamic that you were born into, which caused um, the relationship to your own self-worth. That it's not about you, actually. If you're interested in more about this, I will be doing a webinar on Chiron at the end of the month. I'll put all the details underneath this video and in the first pinned comment, so you can sign up if you're interested in that, and especially so if this is your Chiron return. If you have Chiron in Taurus or even at the end of Aries, this could be a really interesting time to look into those things. All right, Aries, I will see you in the next video. And so for Taurus, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, this is, of course, happening in your first house. So for a long time, you've had Chiron in the 12th house, which has been a place of a lot of unconscious or perhaps a little bit hidden, unclear aspects of your psyche or of your family, your lineage, and your inherited sort of spiritual relationship. Your ancestors are here in the 12th house. Your immediate past is in your 12th house, meaning past life. And there may have been a lot of understanding and growth around that. It's still ongoing as Chiron will go back into that part of your chart. And now Chiron is coming into your first house of self. And this is really specific to you, your place in the world. Am I welcome here? Am I valued here? And do I value myself? And what value do I bring? So Chiron has a lot to do with that quality of healing, but it's not only your own healing or what healing might need to be done, but it's you that takes on this role of healer, and especially in the first house. So this could be an opportunity for you to see yourself in that healing capacity. As you go through these next 7 years, you learn about yourself as a healer. You learn about something to do with how you express this capacity to be a force for good or a force for healing for other people. And keeping in mind that your fifth house of self-expression is Virgo, this is part of Taurus. It's part of how Taurus expresses. It's as a healer. And the moon is your exaltation ruler, and the moon is currently in the fifth house with the south node. So there's something here that you're releasing or letting go in terms of your way of showing up, your way of expressing yourself, that may have a lot to do with the next 7 years, that you're looking to operate from a different place of value, self-worth, seeing yourself in a different place. You've just had 7 years of Uranus here in your first house of self, and even your physical appearance and how you show up in the world in general, how you navigate through life. That will have completely changed you. And now Chiron comes through and does the deeper inner work. It's going to show up in ways that you are seeing yourself or valuing yourself in a different way through relationships, but through all the different dynamics of your life. And here we also find that your ruler, your ascendant ruler, Venus, is in the fourth house, and that's the house of your psychological or emotional or even material well-being and sense of what makes you happy, what makes you feel secure. So there's a lot here that you need to understand from that place of security, the deeper inner security that may have to do with your lineage, issues that are coming through your family of origin, or perhaps also with reference to childhood stories that are coming up and your value within the context of the family. Pardon me. I have issues of mold in my house. Mold is chasing me everywhere I go, and it's driving me crazy. So I apologize for that. So Venus is ruled by the sun, as she's in Leo right now. Your ruler Venus is ruled by the sun currently, and that sun is found in your second house of money. So we're emphasizing this whole story of values, money, possessions, the things that you have at your disposal. This is also where we find Uranus, because Uranus moved in here on the 26th of April. And so moving out of your house and your house of self and the body and how you appear, and into the second house of your values and the money that you have and the things that you have at your disposal. So part of this whole period of time, this dynamic, is also going to be tied to the material stuff of life, to the material wealth or abundance or prosperity or the money that you earn, the possessions that you have, the things that you own. And this is especially true because the nodal axis is squaring that Uranus. And the moon, as I said, on the south node is trining back to this Chiron in your first house. So there's something here about your future that you're focusing on, and it's Mercury that is ruling the sun and Uranus in your second house of self-worth and money and so on, that's in your third house of communication. It can also be with reference to a sibling or an extended family member or the notion of children, because Mercury also rules your fifth house. It is a karaka for children, it represents children, and so does Jupiter. So you might be in a period of exploring what it might mean to be a parent, or how you are parenting, or how you were parented, what your early childhood was all about. And this will be part of the Mercury retrograde phase for you, as this will be the story of Mercury retrograding from the 26th degree of your third house back to the 16th degree. And that will take until the whole process of the retrograde moving in and out of your third house goes from the beginning of June all the way to about the 10th of August. So it's a really big phase where you're combining these potentials of understanding your own choice points and your own opinions and your own ways of looking at things, and how that affects how you show up, how that affects how you allow yourself to show up. Because Chiron in Taurus in the first house is also expressing this feeling of being unsure about showing up, um, unsure about even being welcome. And so often we can have issues in the early family story. The parents were not expecting this child, for example, especially in the early degrees of Taurus, especially in the first house or even the 12th house. It's a surprise. Boom, we're pregnant. We're having this baby. Or oops, we're pregnant, and what are we going to do now? And so what can happen is unconsciously you can take on this feeling of not being loved, not being appreciated, not being valued for yourself. And that would have to be seen from a natal chart, but this is a signature that can be there. And this is especially true if you're having your Chiron return, that you can understand those are circumstantial things, not personal to you. And that if your life you've been up until this point really experiencing yourself as unwelcome or too much, presenting yourself in a way that holds yourself back or doubts your capacity to be fully yourself or fully seen, this would be a great period of time to really heal all of that. Look at that from a bigger, broader picture, understanding the parental story with compassion and recognizing that that's part of their story, their experience that you were born into. um, so this is something that we can look at, by the way, when I do this workshop on Chiron. So I'll be doing a webinar on Chiron at the end of the month, and all the details will be below. And the link to join will be there too. And especially if you're having your Chiron return, this could be something we'll look at. We'll have a chance to look at some charts and understand how it's impacting certain individuals, as well as in the general sense, what this all represents to a natal chart. Um, what else have we got here? Yeah, Venus is in a trine, lovely trine from your fourth house back to the 12th house. So these are hidden houses. These are houses of things that are going on beneath the surface, not necessarily open and clear to other people. But because we also have this in a configuration that includes Pluto as an opposition, you might be also wondering what is your what is your position with reference to your social status? How you might need to recreate something that comes from a feeling of belonging or not belonging, or your sense of security or insecurity. Again, Venus is your ruler, so really important. And then the fact that she's opposing Pluto, which she does only roughly once a year, is a big deal at this time. Um, Chiron will not be squaring Pluto until 2027, but it's in a broad square. It's a sign-based square. At the very least, it's going to be showing up as a tension there between yourself and your social status. And that includes your career status, or any kind of vocation or feeling of purpose. Like, why do I do what I do? What is my personal ambition? What are my marital ambitions, for example, or my relationship ambitions? All of those things can come through this. And Mars in your first house, being the ruler of your seventh house, also perhaps suggests that you need to assert something of yourself or what you need in relationships. And so this Chiron is also going to be an opportunity to show you where sometimes you're holding yourself back and blaming another. This is unfortunately one of the Taurian traits, which is that there's a sense of um, holding back and waiting passively for the other to act. and trying to attract what one needs, which is, of course, the part of the beauty of Taurus as well. But it can really be a challenge in terms of communication with the other person who may not be giving you what you need, and you need to speak up and say something. And this will be the Mercury retrograde message for you, where you can learn more about how to manifest or show up or um, assert your will, assert your needs, and speak to them at this time. So a lot of that is going to be an opportunity for you in this whole 7-year cycle, but especially right now in the next 3 months that Chiron is going through your first house for the very first time in 50 years. So, or almost. Enjoy this. I will put more details about everything down in the description box, and I will see you in the next video. So for Gemini, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, so happy birthday, first of all. It's nearly the end of your birthday cycle if it's your Sun. Chiron has just entered your 12th house, and it's a very interesting place in the domain of our unaware self, or the hidden aspects of ourself, or our spiritual aspects of ourself, things that are sort of so familiar, so close to us that we don't notice them. This can be described as the unconscious, the hidden self. But it can also be our shadow self, and it can be things that we're doing that are actually our undoing. And especially with Chiron, the saboteur can come out if we're not taking care of what Chiron means for us. And that means natally, but also in this particular case here at the early part of Taurus, Chiron is representing a sense of self-worth and value. It can also be with Taurus, some aspect of indulgence, self-indulgence. So this is ruled by Venus in the third house of having fun, being Leo, having a good time. This is the third, seventh, and 11th house significators, which are the Kama houses, the houses of pleasure. And here we see Venus there, being all being all in her glory in Leo, liking to show a bit of herself and be very outgoing, very social. So this can be a part of this dynamic. Also, as Venus is the ruler of your fifth house, it can be part of how you're expressing yourself. So the third house is literally the expression, the communication, and how you're verbalizing things. And your ruler, Mercury, is in the second house of your voice and how you speak to things, how you literally use your voice, and also your values. And so part of you is going to have to figure out over these next 7 years, and especially now in these first 3 months, you're going to have to figure out your sense of why you undermine yourself, or what you give value to that or not, that might be holding you back, or might be something that is actually part of a strategy of self-sabotage that's unconscious to you. Mercury being on the verge of retrograde means it's very slow. So your ruler is slow, and it's going to go back through to the 16th degree of your second house of your money and your self-worth and your possessions and your income. And this will be something that you can contemplate at this time. How am I working for money? How am I relating to money? How am I relating to my own value? And this will also include your whatever supports you. This can be with reference to money, possessions, and so on, but also food. And where we have Chiron in the 12th house can be hidden habits, habits that undermine your good health, habits that undermine what is supporting you overall in a healthy way. And because Mars is there in the 12th house and it's the ruler of your 6th house, there can be aspects of things that are working against you, and including even relationships that are working against you. That may be people or friends or somebody that you are needing to contend with. Mars is ruling the 11th house. This could be an elder sibling, or it could be a friend or a friends group or a social group or a dynamic of belonging, some kind of network that you need to examine. You need to question, is this working for me? This is part of the bigger story of Uranus going through your first house and squaring the nodes, especially as the North Node is in your 10th house, just one more month or so, 5 weeks, which has been a 1.5 year long journey of understanding your sense of drive and ambition, and how you are showing up, how you are in the world, out in the world. as you open your door and you step out into the world of what other people see in you and how you want to be seen. So a lot of this is going to be complementary to the Uranus changing who you are and how you're showing up in the first house. And also the fact that your ruler, Mercury, is retrograding gives you an opportunity not only to sort of revise your way of relating to your own self-worth and your values and money and all those things, but also to really dig deep. And that can be through, stepping back in meditation, quiet time. Yes, even Gemini needs quiet time and maybe retreating, going away, taking care of your vessel and taking care of your body. That's the Mars aspect there in the 12th, ruling the sixth house, and also the fact that the moon is on the south node, ruled by your ruler, Mercury. And Mercury is ruled by this moon. So the fourth house is about what makes you happy. And the moon represents your physical presence, your physical body. And the moon is the exaltation ruler of Chiron in Taurus. And Taurus is the where the moon exalts. So many things there that you can work with in terms of a deeper healing of yourself and your self-worth at the same time that you have this opportunity with the square from the nodes to Uranus and changing who you really are, how you're showing up in dynamic ways. Saturn is making you quite serious about the future and your vision for the future. It will have you becoming, and this will be very helpful, very selective over the people who are in your life. And as Chiron's retrograding back into that 11th house where Saturn is, until April 2028. Chiron will be coming back until April 2027 into your 11th house. And so this story of figuring out, well, am I hanging out with the right crowd or not? Or am I looking towards the right future or not? And what do I need to do about that? What are the choices I need to make? This is Venus in your third house, making choices, making change, doing something different. Um, Third house is being using your skills and willpower and your communication skills especially. And this is all part of the journey, I think, between now and April 2027 for you. But this will be really crystal clear up until September when Chiron moves back into the 11th. So a lot to work with in the months ahead. And I think it's going to bring you a lot of benefit, but you'll need to kind of step away. Maybe it'll feel initially like holding yourself back in some way. You'll have to step away to contemplate and be like Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin, sit on the side of that river and just enjoy a little quiet time. So also Venus is in a trine to Neptune. So there can be some really great opportunity for connecting with people socially in a pleasant way. This can also, however, be where you take things too lightly, too easily. This is also part of the Gemini shadow, which is that you're a bit flippant with your relationship dynamic. And that's also partly the dynamic of Sagittarius on the seventh house, and that's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter, remember the big flirt with lots and lots of relationships, and so that is something that you can also work with in terms of these next few days, because it's just another 10 days before Jupiter moves into your third house. So you can really look deeply at those values and how they're impacting your relationships, how they're impacting your social status, including relational status, and your personal ambitions. So lots and lots to work with here, Gemini, and I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, Chiron has gone into the 11th house of your future, your dreams, and your wishes for what's coming down the pipeline, and what you are hoping to connect with or achieve or relate to in your social circle. So the 11th house is your friends, your network. It's the people that connect with you online. It could be described as the audience as well. This can be something you will be tracing because of the Uranus transit through here already since May 2018. And Chiron simultaneously was going through your 10th house from April 2018. So the way that you present yourself out in the world, the way that you see yourself, and in terms of your role in the world has changed a lot since 2018. And now Chiron can show you issues that have to do with the money that you earn from what you do, healing any kind of wounding around that, which is also going to be part of the role of Jupiter moving out of the first house where you've had Jupiter there since June 9th of 2025, where it's exalted in your first house. But I know that, as I've said in my Jupiter video, it's not going to necessarily bring great things for people, including Cancer, who's dealing with Jupiter in the first house. It can just feel like a lot. It feels like a lot's going on. And all of that depends on your natal chart rather than Jupiter by transit. So why I'm saying that is because we're going to have this square from Jupiter to Chiron very soon in July from the two money houses for Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. So Chiron going into the second from the 10th represents gains from what you do, or great gains that can come from people who support you. But Chiron is there, meaning that there can be a difficulty in accepting. You're not necessarily sure you're worthy of it, or there can be issues again around who you socialize with, and really questioning the value of friendships, questioning your value within groups and friendships, but also questioning the value of the people already in your life, and are they the ones that should be in your life. Now, the second house in from the ascendant, so second from Cancer is Leo, and that's where we find Venus, which is ruling Chiron right now. So there's a really strong emphasis here on income, money that you have at your fingertips, the money that you have in your bank account, dynamics around finances. There can be some real struggle here. And again, the fact that Jupiter is in the first house can mitigate things, can make things easier. And in fact, probably for Cancer, there's going to be more benefit seen by Jupiter going into your second house rather than having Jupiter in the first, even though it's exalted in the first. Um, but nonetheless, it's going because that will also mitigate the Saturn in the 10th house, which is hard. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of pressure in terms of how you feel obliged to show up. And then the Jupiter by sign by the end of June is going to be trining Saturn. And so that trine continues for quite some time. And it becomes exact at the end of August, beginning of September, when we still have Chiron in that 11th house. So this will be a part of the story of mitigating this feeling of whether it's financial enoughness or personal enoughness, and how to feel comfortable growing, or how to feel maybe comfortable being vulnerable. Cancer can be quite defensive, it's protective, it is shy. The water signs are all shy. And Cancer is particularly shy in the sense that all of the houses of how we show up, first, fifth, and ninth, are water houses. So they're mute houses. And so the water houses reinforce each other in that sense of holding things in, holding things back, repressing. And now with Chiron in the 11th house, there's going to be either a visibility around the role of Cancer in their healing or what they're doing through healing, or their role as a healer. And this will be more pronounced if you are post your Chiron return, or if this moment is your Chiron return, this will be the moment to set up your stage. But you will be growing into this if you're coming through your Chiron return in the next 7 years. But if you've already done that, like myself, and I know many of my viewers are in their 50s, so 50s, 60s even, so many of you are in that category. If that has already been done, then you are starting to show up in the chironic role of teacher, healer, activator, and that's how people start to see you as Saturn. Saturn makes you take the role of responsible one, the responsibility that is showing up in your world outside your life, yourself, or your marriage or your profession or whatever. And then Chiron can be the angle of taking care to heal and healing others through your healing, being the vector for healing. This is one of the chironic things that will bring benefit for Cancer. It's a sextile to Cancer, very supportive for you. And the moon, which is the ruler of Cancer, is the exaltation ruler of your 11th house. So the moon is exalted in in Taurus, ruled by Venus, and Venus is in the second house, again, referencing money. and ruling that Chiron and Mars that's up there in the 11th house. Mars in the 11th house is really fantastic for putting a little bit more effort and focus in your in what's coming forward in the future, what you want to accomplish, setting yourself up to do something specific. Mars rules your 10th house of career, and therefore, whatever you're contributing to, how you're reaching out into the public or into the groups or into your vision for your future, then that's going to set you up for a 2-year cycle in this particular case, but also with Chiron, the 7-year cycle of of the dynamic of how you contribute socially or how you earn, because it's also part of the income story. The moon, your ruler, is on the south node. This week, it's not great, simply because it depletes the moon to be with the nodes. When the south node comes along, it's about letting go or about what's taken away or about things that are draining. And in this case, because the moon is your ruler, there may be some energy around a sense of giving up or not being clear, not being entirely sure what's the next step. Um, and certainly because you've got this moon south node dynamic built in to a trine with Chiron, it's part of this story. Now, because you've got Mercury in your first house, which is in this conversation with the moon, which is ruling it, and vice versa, I think this Mercury retrograde cycle in the first house for Cancer is going to be really telling you a lot about the choices that you need to make, how you need to communicate that, how you need to express that, including who you are or what you want to do, and how that's going to affect your future or your way of feeling connected socially, or your way of reaching out into the public or into your future as well. So the moon on the south node is best used as a spiritual tool. And because it's also part of the square to Uranus, so at the exact ingress, the moon is exactly squaring Uranus. It's partile. And here it's still a very strong square. It's just that I'm moving the dial as we go through the zodiac. But having the nodal axis from with the north node in your ninth, south node in your third, and then squaring Uranus, where the moon, your ruler, is squaring Uranus, this is a major turnaround, a major choice point that has a lot to do with your vision for the future. Jupiter in your house of self is ruling the ninth house of your sense of why you're here. And then Chiron, Mars are saying, well, what does the future look like based on why I think I'm here? What is this role that I have? And so we still have some time in this period of, let's say, for Jupiter, another 10 days of Jupiter in the first house, but also with Mercury retrograde up until the 10th or so of August, there's a lot of opportunity for reconsidering what it is that we want, how we want to show up. And then we start to find that this is part of the expression of Chiron, particularly more perhaps clear the second time that Chiron ingresses, which will be April of 2027. And I'll do a separate video about that because there's a lot already in this particular video. But this is the ingress chart, the first ingress chart of Chiron moving into Taurus. And I feel like it packs a punch the first time around. It really is the one that is the most expressive. But the second ingress chart will tell us more details in terms of how the rest of the transit will feel. There's so much more that can be said about this moment in time. If you're interested in learning more about Chiron in Taurus, and especially if this is your Chiron return, if you're 49 to 51 or so, and you're having your Chiron return, or even if you just had it in Aries, and you might even be getting it again because Chiron goes all the way back into the 26th degree of Aries, do join this webinar that I'm having. All the details are below this video. It's coming up at the end of the month, and we can talk about this in terms of your own natal chart. All right, so I hope you can join us, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And for Leo, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, Chiron moves into your 10th house of your visibility, or the way that you show up, or the way that your reputation is managed, or the way that people see you, what you accomplish, and what you want to accomplish. It's your goals for yourself. It's like your personal ambition. And the 10th house is your house of social standing. That can include your social status, married, not married, employed, not employed, whatever the thing is, self-employed, being an employee, whatever the thing is. This is the 10th house. The 10th house also represents parents and parenting, both ends of that. So you as a parent and also your parents and how that's affected you and all kinds of authority roles, authority figures of all kinds. Now, Venus is in your first house of self, and she is ruling your 10th house. And that's very interesting itself because it pulls you directly into the story. So your preferences, your way of appealing and showing up, and your way of charming is part of this story. So you've got Mars up there also in the 10th house. Ambition is part of this bigger picture for you right now. And so your desire nature, your ambition is very strong in this period. And Chiron in the 10th is going to challenge you to overcome any self-doubt, any kind of self inadequacy, lack. Um, a feeling of not being valued or not being clear of what you value. And this will be a very big part of this transit. As I've said many times, if you've been here a while, Leo is about learning how to shine. It's about learning to be this wonderful, happy, effulgent self and the leader quality of just being and letting other people follow if they want to and not bossing people around or trying to control them, but rather having the confidence that you're just carrying on your own way. And this is contributing to you learning that in yourself because very often Leo has not mastered that lesson, but is undergoing the lesson. We're here to learn the lessons of our signs. And and so often with Leo, there's some real wounding around the father. There's some real wounding around identity, around even issues of filiation and issues that might have some kind of connection to not being clear, who am I? And this will be a period of your life where that story becomes extremely important because Saturn, which is also a karaka for the father, is in your ninth house of the Father, the God, the Father, and the road to God, and this sense of your higher purpose and meaning in life. And this is part of a challenge where you might have to overcome some daddy issues or some things that have been missing or connections that were misfiring with your own father or with fathers in the lineage. And of course, your ruler, the sun, is in the 11th house, also focusing forward on the future, the sense of what the future might hold for you. It's a big part of this dynamic. You're going to have the South Node moving into your first house, and that will be on the 27th of July for the True Node. And I'll do a separate video about that, but this is going to be a big year for you, especially as Chiron, right there at the top of your chart, is going to be emphasizing this sense of needing to test your relationship to your self-worth, your relationship to money. Is it worth it? Like, is my job worth it? Is the thing that I want to do in this lifetime really aligned with how I feel about myself? Your second house of self-worth is ruled by Mercury, which is currently in your 12th with Jupiter, and Mercury is also the ruler of Uranus, as well as the Sun, your ruler. And that's creating a very interesting dynamic with the nodal axis, as well as with the moon, which is on the South Node in your second house of family and self-worth and all the things that come through what supports you, what nurtures you, what takes care of your needs in terms of finances at your fingertips or what money you have in the bank or the possessions that you have. Can even relate to investments and so on. And so here what we're looking at is a major change based on something that you see changing coming down the pipeline with Uranus in your 11th house of the future, or even connecting you to a social vision that's changing dramatically that you're having to relate to. Now, listen to the beginning of this video. It tells a lot about the themes of really readjusting to social relationships, to money, to lack, to availability, to abundance in general. And this is the theme that you're embodying right now. Venus in your first house is opposing Pluto in your seventh house, and they create a very gentle T square. So they're not exact, it's not very strong, but it's thematically there. And Chiron and Pluto will be squaring next year. From the next time Chiron comes in, it will move more quickly through Taurus. And as Pluto retrogrades so slowly, they will eventually square each other. And then in 2028, as of April 28th, Saturn will move in there too. So what you're doing right now is setting the groundwork for this bigger journey, let's say, of change with reference to your marital status or your social ambitions, your social status. This is changing also because of the Uranus in your 11th house. And with the fact that the South Node moves into your first house, a lot of who you thought you were is changing, and new people will come in. So Chiron in your 10th house is about recognizing where you've been holding back some aspect of yourself based on the feeling of lack of enoughness, lack of support, a lack of money, whatever the thing is that you feel you lack. That is something that you'll be asked to heal in a way that allows you then to take on this role of guide or teacher, let's say, or somebody who's showing the way that can even end up being a career choice, that can end up being something that you choose as a profession, the 10th house being potentially your vocation or career. But again, if it's with reference to children, or you as a parent, or you with reference to your own parents, and especially the father, since Saturn is very strongly implicated here in the 9th house, there may be something here that is a lesson for you to learn. So all of these things are preparing the way. You'll have a huge boost by getting Jupiter going into your first house. So there's going to be an expanded sense of possibility, an expanded sense of self that is contributing to this story of self-worth and your values. You may decide, for example, if you're working in a particular environment, you think, I can't relate to this environment anymore. This is no longer the job that I want to represent. This is no longer the company I want to represent, or the government, or whatever. That 10th house is representing all of those different things. And I'm not going to be doing this anymore. Saturn is also ruling your 6th house of work and your 7th house of relationship. And so your longer term vision is part of this story as well, how your everyday life shapes up and how that's going to change who you relate to, especially as Venus is opposite Pluto right now, as Chiron moves in. So quite a really important and significant opportunity for you to dig in and see yourself in this genuinely Leo way, where you recognize what you have to offer. What is my value? What value can I bring to the way that I show up out in the world, and seeing how your reputation plays a role in that too. Um, Venus is also trining, or has been trining Neptune in your 9th house. So there may be something that's quite visionary coming through here, a kind of a sense of fulfillment of a dream or a vision for your purpose. Certainly there's a a spiritualizing dynamic that's happening here. And the Mercury retrograde is going to help with that. As well, because Mercury is retrograding back and forth in your 12th. I'll do a separate video about that. But that's also part of this thought, let's say, this vision, the thought that goes on behind it. And what underpins that is this Chiron sense of value, your self-worth, and the value that you're bringing. You also, much like Taurus, you can have a role that is quite visible in the healing arts. So being a healer, showing up as a teacher healer figure is something that might show up for you. And again, if you're not interested in all of that sort of outer stuff, it's not about having to be famous. Like often when I say these things, people immediately jump to fame. Like you need to be, I don't know, Wayne Dyer or something. No, you just need to show up in this way where people say, wow, I had this conversation over coffee with this person and it really changed who I thought I was. And that's this Chiron in the 10th house. Um, that you can embody as a role, and especially so if you have this natally. So if you do have it natally and you're interested, or you've got like late Aries Chiron, for example, if you're in the middle of your Chiron return, I invite you to a webinar that I'm announcing. It's below this video and in the first pinned comment. You'll find it's coming up at the end of the month, and we're going to look at Chiron coming into Taurus and how this impacts you specifically with your chart. So we're going to have time to look at a few charts and recognize the impact of Chiron specifically in your natal chart and how that's going to show up through the return. All right, so you're very welcome to join me there, and otherwise I'll see you in the next video. and Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Well, this is going to be in your ninth house. This Chiron has just moved into your house of higher vision, your sense of why you're here. Why am I alive? The reason that you are alive is coming through that Dharma house, the ninth house. So the first house, the fifth, and the ninth house are the expression of why you're here. And especially as you've been contemplating this quite a lot, with the South Node in your first house and shedding a lot of identification with things, putting yourself in a different position, let's say, with reference to how you show up, releasing certain patterns, perhaps anxieties or ways of showing up in relationships, particularly that have been hindering you or that have you recognized have been draining you. Now with Chiron in the ninth house, you get to have this vision of a higher learning, a higher principle, higher knowledge for all of this. And it's trinal to you. This is another Earth sign. So Chiron in fixed Earth Taurus is in a trine to your mutable Earth Virgo. And and that's also going to be very supportive. Where Chiron was a little bit invisible to you, it was in aversion to you when Chiron was in Aries for the last 7 years, almost 8 years. And that meant that there was a lot of work that was being done behind the scenes or in intimacy or in places that were where you connect with other people, what you share with other people. This becomes purely about yourself and your ambitions and goals and how you want to reach out into higher wisdom and knowledge, maybe even start to work in that capacity as a teacher. Ninth house is about teaching higher learning. It's not the ABCDs, it's the teaching from a place of higher wisdom. And so, if it's not already happening, or if this is not your Chiron return, then you will acquire those skills over the next 7 years where you're really looking at what you can bring to people as inspiration. The ninth house is very much about inspiring, it's very much about learning from a place of higher wisdom, bigger philosophies or religious experiences or experiences that have to do with the non-material stuff of life. Now, the ninth house also represents fathers, father figures, teachers that are influential, for example, counselors and so on, astrologers as well. And Chiron going in there can be also an opportunity for you to heal relationships with all of those people, or again, to heal as you are in that role, to work through more healing in that particular dynamic. And again, if you do have issues with your father at this time, Chiron over the next 7 years will really help you to work through that, will help you work through the lack or the feeling of perhaps lack of value or your perceived sense of lacking value in the eyes of your father, or through your own father's sense of lacking self-worth that you have picked up on. And that's especially true if you have Chiron natally here. And of course, your ruler, Mercury, is preparing to retrograde at this time. And that's really significant because you've got this opportunity now to question your future, your sense of what's coming down the road. What do I want to see going forward? And you can really take your time with that. Mercury is ruled, because it's in Cancer, it's ruled by the moon, which is in your first house of self. And then, of course, Mercury rules you, and therefore the moon and Mercury are in this kind of hidden communication with each other. But the moon coming up to the south node in your first house is really about shedding some emotional story or emotional expectation or fear or anxiety. And especially because at this particular time of the ingress, you'll see it in the introduction, the moon was exactly squaring Uranus from your 10th, from the first into the 10th. And Uranus, of course, is still broadly squaring the nodes really tightly until the middle of July. So we really have a big story of change for you in the way you present yourself out in the world. The 10th house can also be seen as your parents or the authority figures in life, bosses and people like that, the government, this kind of thing. And so this can also be part of this bigger story, where you're looking at things from a different lens, where Mercury is showing you a way to see your future differently, or even to see how you fit into a bigger dynamic. It could be a social dynamic, or it could be a collective, like fitting into society in a particular way. Who are your friends? Who are your acquaintances? Are they working for you? Are they not working for you? This is twofold, not only because Mercury is your ruler, and that's part of the retrograde, let's say, focus for you. Really, the story continuing until the 10th or so of August, but also because Jupiter rules your house of relationship. And so there's two layers of this moving through this dynamic of the 11th house and the people you hang out with and the people you want to spend more time with going forward. The 11th is also your house of gains, and having your ruler in the house of gains is really quite helpful. And it's specifically related for you to your Mercury ruled 10th house. So the fact that Mercury is the second from the 10th references the gains you get from the thing that you do. Can be bonuses, for example, or some kind of a raise or some kind of an opportunity that comes up, some kind of positional dynamic that's shifting, new opportunities in moving up the company ladder if that's where you're working, or up leveling your own work and creating something for yourself, which is also a part of the potential here. And so this is also something that your Mercury retrograde opportunity will bring you this reflection. Let's see how this all works out. Do I want this thing? Is this the way I want things to go? Venus from your 12th house, which is the hidden house, and it's also the ruler of this Chiron transit through your 9th house, also where Mars is currently, and she's ruling Mars. Um, from the 12th house is in opposition to Pluto in the 6th house. So there might be something here where you recognize there's certain desires, things that are hidden from you, things that are not really clear, or ways that you recognize you need to observe indulgences or things that you're doing, even relationships, that maybe intimate relationships potentially as well, where you recognize there's something that needs to change based on something that you're already recognizing needs changing in terms of your everyday life. This can be impacting your health. If there's self-indulgence that is impacting your health, then that would be a story that Chiron can help with by having an elevated vision for your life. What is life all about? Is it about the 9 to 5? Is it about the stress and turmoil? Is it all about toiling, or is there something more? And this is the theme of Chiron for you in the 9th house. Um, and keeping in mind that Jupiter will be entering into your 12th house, Venus is showing the way already here. So this will be a very big consideration as Jupiter is going to be squaring Chiron coming up very soon, as it at the end of June will be squaring Chiron as it moves into Leo. And then everything that's moving into Leo is now going to be squaring Chiron in your 9th house. So your spiritual take on life, your more intimate connection to God, or whatever you describe as God, cosmos, or the power, the source, source intelligence, whatever you want to call that, that becomes more and more important as we go forward, especially in the year ahead. But with Chiron, I think it's going to be a part of your growth and personal development over the next 7 years. Your level of personal development will be incredibly high with Chiron going through the 9th house of personal growth and development. You will be itching to learn and teach and share. Once you go through something, you go through an event, you go through a realization, then you want to share it out. And this is Chiron in the 9th house. And you might be finding yourself actually a new vocation based on all of that, based on the fact that you're just going through that yourself. And recognizing where that's useful to other people. And this can be part of the Uranus in your 10th, changing how you're showing up. So much to say here, Virgo, so I will leave it at that, and I will come back with another video. And in the meantime, if you have Chiron in Taurus, and this is your Chiron return, or Chiron in late Aries, for example, or if you just want to know more about that, you're welcome to join the webinar that I'm doing at the end of the month, and you can sign up at the link below, and do join, and we'll look at some charts. I can't guarantee we look at everybody's charts. That's going to be impossible, but we will see charts that are showing up the themes, let's say, of Chiron coming into Taurus, and you'll be able to ask questions directly if you're able to attend. And of course, there will be a recording if you can't attend live. So I hope to see you there, and otherwise I'll see you in the next video. So Libra, this is a very interesting time for you with Chiron moving into your 8th house, and your ruler, Venus, is both your ruler of yourself, the way that you appear and who you are, how you navigate through life, as well as your eighth house, which is this more hidden aspect of yourself, this place of more secrecy, more how you're dealing with crisis or how you're dealing with intimacy or how you're dealing with other people in intimate ways or shared ways, money, for example. And Venus, your ruler, is in the 11th house, where she's showing very clearly the way forward in terms of either money and values through what you earn from what you do, or gains that are possible for you, or social approbation, things that are coming through your audience, for example, or your friends groups or your networks and so on. She's paving the way for Jupiter, which is about to move in there about 10 days later. And so that's going to be a big theme for you. So this is maybe a good way of preparing the ground for digging deep and working more on these things that are a little bit under the hood, where you are being tested in terms of overcoming fears, overcoming things that have you've kept secret or that you have never looked at or that you were not aware of. Eighth house can be things that we're not aware of. It's with secrets that we know and we keep, or it can also be like, oh, really? Did that happen? Like family secrets and things like that. And Chiron will be working through that with you for the next 7 years. So the eighth house is also representing astrology. So eighth and ninth house are both astrology. Eighth is more the mystery school aspect of that, the occult and the hidden knowledge, let's say, that is handed down. And Chiron going through that eighth house is going to make you really, really interested in all those healing arts or the occult arts. If it's not astrology, it can be something related to that, some kind of maybe psychological healing. You can do that for yourself, where you're deciding, you know what, it's a good time. I need to start questioning some things. I need some support. I need to go to a psychologist or a therapy group or something like that. Um, or it could be that you start to realize, I'm pretty good at this listening thing, because you are, and I maybe will start doing that as a career. And this is part of the bigger sense of seeing yourself differently as your purpose is changing with Uranus going through your ninth house as well, trinal to you, changing who you are, with Pluto in your fifth house, changing how you express who you are, changing how you see yourself expressing your creative outputs, your creative self. Also, because the South Node in your 12th house is finishing up this journey of really quite deeply spiritual excavation for, let's say, the last year and a half or so. And it will go into the 11th house, where you see that dreams for the future are changing, or the way that you're evolving through social connections or people, groups, networks, and so on from the 11th house way. This is something that's changing you, and it's part of this bigger configuration with Uranus in a T square with the nodes. I've done a separate video on that, so there's more to say about that in that video. But Chiron in the eighth, like behind the scenes here, is also going to be pulling in quite a lot of the necessary awareness or knowledge or hidden truth, hidden knowledge that is going to be useful to you in terms of understanding yourself, but also perhaps understanding what is holding you back, what has held you back from through fears, for example, or through some kind of family trauma or some ancestral trauma that may not have been your own direct experience. And you're learning from that, and you can find that there's a lot to learn as a result of opening up to pain and revealing that. So Chiron is about looking at things that are not necessarily easy to look at, and particularly so in the eighth house. But when you do that, your growth is huge. Chiron going through the eighth house is an opportunity to really get lots of talent and gifts and information coming through about those occult practices or psychological practices, all the things to do with mental illness, mental health, what it means to be human, all the basic things that make us human in our foibles and all of the things that we sabotage in intimacy because of fear, because of a lack of self-worth. And the eighth house represents intimacy, represents everything we share with another. So equally, Mars in the eighth house can show you where there's some challenge there, some challenge in either like a marital dynamic or a business partnership dynamic. Mars rules your seventh house. Some disputes around money or a need to step up and deal with things financially in a relationship. Any kind of things that are coming at you through a relationship that are really not okay. it's about testing that and saying, wait a minute, I have to see how much I'm worth, how much I'm seeing my own worth in this, and need to stand up for that. So Mars rules your second house of your self-worth and your value, and as well as your relational house. Pardon me. And so that's also with reference to those things, but also that can be about money management. So you might need to be stepping up and dealing with who pays for what, who owes what is available to you, and how you need to be clear about that. Um, Venus is in the 11th house of gains, so it can be quite favorable. Some helpful, fortunate event can come through friends, can come from women, even specifically because it's Venus. And it can come from being seen online, being seen socially, being seen quite literally on a stage. And Venus is opposite Pluto here. So Pluto in your fifth house, which has been changing your sense of what you need to express your joy and fun and love, romance, or connect with your children for that matter. And in opposition to Venus, there can be something that you're realizing that you want to show or that you want to benefit from, that you'd like to have, that is part of even the relational quality that you would like to have, the vision for your future, which is quite affirming with Venus in Leo, maybe showing yourself a little bit more through society, through your vision for, including yourself in your future, God forbid, and seeing that there are some things here that need some housekeeping needing to be done in your life. Now, Saturn, which is your exaltation ruler, is across the way in Aries in your seventh house of relationships. So not very comfortable. So there is a little bit of squeezing around relationships. Venus makes this easier as your ruler up in the 11th house. Also, the fact that she's going to be trining Saturn in the days after this ingress, and keeping in mind she will rule Chiron for the whole time that Chiron is in your eighth house. Your ruler is going to be as important for Chiron as it is for you day to day, and especially so if you have your Chiron return now. So you're looking at your self-worth, your self-value, your relational dynamics, and money stuff, shared resources, and all that stuff really closely at this time. Venus is trinal to, she's trining in a favorable aspect to Neptune in your seventh house. One thing to be wary of simply is that you may find that you're quite generous with people, that you're kind, or you want to be kind, you want to be helpful. And here, what would be really helpful for you to keep in mind is to separate, as we say, the needy from the greedy, that you are clear who you are dealing with. And are they worth your effort? Are they worth your money? Are they worth your time? Chiron in the eighth can show you that, can show you issues around money, um, some real wounding around money, or how other people treat money, or how other people try and control you with money, or on the other hand, how you might control others with money, especially if you have this natal placement. And so all of those issues can come up on how people might control you with emotions or intimacy or money and resources and all that stuff. So notice all of that. It's a fleeting transit. So Venus in a trine to Neptune is a fleeting transit, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. And just mull over, because this is also the ingress chart. So it does give a description of a flavor of this time. That at the very least will be the next 3 months, but also really imprints the whole meaning of Chiron going into Taurus for us now in our contemporary stage. All right, so I'll be back with more videos. If you would like to join the workshop on Chiron going into Taurus, especially if you have Chiron in Taurus, then you can sign up below. All the details are going to be in the link below, and you can join me for that webinar. And if you don't have time to join, or it's the wrong time zone, then that will be recorded and you can follow along later. All right, good luck with everything. I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Well, your ruler is in the same house as Chiron, in the house of relationships. So there's a lot of your attention going on in terms of relational dynamics. It could be around colleagues, it could be around people that are business partners, clients even, but also especially your intimate relationships, your one-on-one partnerships or really good friends. And there's some wounding here, or there's some change here. A lot of attention going in the direction of what you need to see as your value in relationship. You may struggle with that. Um, with Chiron in the seventh, and especially if this is your natal Chiron return. Again, listen to the introductions of your age sort of 49 to 51. This will be a part of your Chiron return. And even if it's coming down the pipeline, this is something to keep in mind. So this story of Chiron in the seventh can really have you doubt your lovability. This would be something to notice natally, but also to recognize where that feeling of not being appreciated, not being loved is actually the problem. So it pushes you away. So it's an original story that comes through unconsciously through your early childhood or infancy or prenatal experience, but also it is the thing that pushes others away unconsciously, which is not what you want, but what is the result of seeing that Chiron go through the seventh house and have you doubt your lovability, doubt your value in relationship. This can be, let's say, if it's referenced to clients or business partnerships, you might find yourself being taken advantage of, or you might find yourself overgiving. You might find yourself in a position where you are potentially even cheated in the relationship, whether it be morally or financially or whatever. And that shows you a particular wound, which is really about, am I listening to my heart? Am I listening to my guidance? Am I noticing red flags? And this will be what Chiron teaches you. So having this understanding of Chiron in the seventh might have you realize where you need to step up in terms of your self-esteem, in terms of being loved, especially again, if this is your Chiron return, and also where you might recognize that you're often going to be working in a dynamic of healing through relationships. So part of your growth and healing will be because of relationships, and that's not a bad thing. This can be particularly strong if it's with reference to marriage, marital partners, or professional partnerships, because Venus, which is ruling those things, ruling your seventh house, ruling this Chiron and your ruler Mars, is in your 10th house of your marital status, your social status, your career goals, your vocation, and your ambitions, and so on. And so this can be part of this bigger story of learning. Now, Pluto, which is your modern ruler, which I don't use, I focus on Mars as your ruler, but hey ho, if you think Pluto is your modern ruler, it is. And so Venus is opposing that in your fourth house. So there's something here that is about what is ongoing for you since for 3 years or more even. With Pluto in your fourth house, there's a lot that you're having to dig into. You're digging deep into yourself, understanding yourself more, understanding your early childhood and its influence on you. And this is going to be part of what Chiron is going to be squaring more so in 2027 than and 28 and beyond, but it's still showing up as potential for this being the test between what you are realizing is buried or the feeling that you might need to understand, overcome fears, overcome a sense of insecurity about who you are, or any kind of childhood wounding, any kind of wounding around what was a foundation in life, including your psychological foundation, emotional foundation, relationship to your mother, and that Chiron in terms of how you relate to others. This could be part of the story, and certainly with Venus in opposition to Pluto, that will be highlighted more so this week, this weekend particularly. Coming up, Venus in the 10th is a wonderful opportunity to be seen in a way that's extremely constructive, helpful, positive. And Chiron in the 7th, if you've done that work, the inner work, which Uranus, by the way, is working towards having you do, churning a little bit more internally and understanding what's there, what am I hiding, what am I afraid of divulging, why am I so damn secretive? That Chiron in the seventh house can be a tool for healing others through your own understanding. And this is, I mean, one of the things about Scorpio is you do have that real strong psychological bent, that you're really interested in human psychology. That's because Gemini is on the eighth house for you. And that's where we find Uranus at this time. And it's in a square to the nodes, and that's also where the moon was on the south node at the time of the ingress. So the ingress was on the 19th at 10 p.m. ish, and that was very precisely squaring Uranus. So there's something very specific about your vision for the future, or how you receive gains, or how you are feeling about your future, issues that might have to do with an elder sibling, issues that might have to do with social connections, how you're bonding with friends or not having enough friends or having to shed friend relationships. All of this is part of the dynamic of Chiron coming into your seventh. You may be in for a really strong overhaul of your friends group. As part of this bigger process, but especially now that you're really seeing things coming up for change right now, big overhaul in terms of how you connect with people. Who are the people in my life? Who are my friends, and do they have my back, as it were? So these are also part of the bigger questions that you're going to be looking at and working through in the next 7 years, with Chiron going through your seventh house. Um, Equally, because the seventh is also you in relationship to clients, for example, you can become a healer. This is part of the bigger dynamic for you, that you can use your understanding, use your own wounding and your own knowledge around that as part of a journey towards healing others. So this square between Uranus and the nodes, where the moon was on the south node, is also very instructive in terms of understanding the Uranian dynamic of intimacy in your eighth house, or other people's money, or what you receive from, whether it be like a retirement payment or insurance payment or tax paid out or coming in. Generally speaking, it's what you're getting, it's what's coming in. And Saturn is also stabilizing something about your everyday, but through challenge, through some big effort. Hang on just a minute. Speaking of effort, my dog is trying to open the door. Just a minute. Push, Meta, push, push. I think she can't do it, so I'm going to just take a minute and I will help her through that door. This is a very long video, I can tell, because normally she waits until Sagittarius before she bothers me. But here we are already at Scorpio. Anyway, it's time to go for a walk with Meta. So let's have a look here, because we got still more to talk about here. It's a big story, this whole thing, and I haven't done a video last week, so I'm including a bunch of other things. Right. So just to wrap this up, your ruler in the seventh is ruling your sixth house, where Saturn is. So there's something you're really pushing up against. You're changing something quite strongly, dynamically in your everyday life, maybe even concerning your health. But the way that you conduct your everyday life is contributing to your health or not, or happiness in a general sense. And but Venus is also in a trine with Neptune. And one thing I would say is, don't try to make this look good for other people. Um, be real for you. And Venus trining Neptune from the 6th, from the 10th back to the 6th, and the fact that Venus is ruling Chiron, ruling your ruler right now, and Mars is ruling the 6th house as well as you. I think there can be perhaps a habit or perhaps a worry about being seen in a particular way that may have you doing things or agreeing to things, or not being certain about how to manage things based on how other people might see you or how you would like to be seen. And all I could say to that would be brutally honest with yourself and be very clear. I need more of this and less of that, and this is how the future will look. And this is partly the Mars going through your seventh, but it's going to teach you how the Chiron is going to be feeling in the next 7 years, so that you're no longer in this kind of state of ambivalence or concern around, am I welcome in this relationship, or is this good, and am I fitting in, or am I over accommodating? This is where you draw the line. The South Node will be going through your 10th house, the North Node going through your 4th. I'll do that in a separate video. And that will be another way of demonstrating how much you're changing in terms of what you need personally to feel secure. And Chiron coming through that seventh house is part of this journey. That's a very timely way of looking at yourself and where you might be afraid of divulging or appearing in a particular way. So I know Scorpio is very defensive about the way it appears, very secretive. It's the cool cucumber, unflappable, but at a certain point you have to realize it's costing you something. This would be the time I think that you become aware of the cost of that, and it's time to stop it. So there we go. All right, Scorpio, I will see you in the next video. If you'd like to, you can join me for my Chiron webinar, which is coming up at the end of the month. And that is going to be recorded if you can't join me live. And all the details for that are below this video. You're very welcome to join. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Bye for now. Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Chiron is moving into your sixth house of healing. So you've just had Uranus there giving you quite a bumpy ride around work and your everyday life and maybe health and healing issues. And Chiron in the sixth house can really actually smooth that out. So Chiron can be an opportunity to really see where you are sabotaging yourself or where you are in a place where you're um, allowing yourself to feel more vulnerable than you need to feel. There can be also with Chiron in the sixth, a new relationship to work, a new relationship to what feels like an obligation, a new way of seeing how you are contributing. Is it too much? Is it appropriate? Is it something that's not good for you? Maybe you're recognizing where your own health needs more attention. You've had your ruler in the eighth house all this time. This is one of the qualities for Sagittarius because the eighth house is a hard house. It's difficult. That's where you have a lot of things to look at and crises to overcome and pain and difficulties with the mother, difficulties with emotions, difficulties with issues that have to do with really intimate parts of your life. And the fact that you have your ruler exalted in that eighth house is what builds all of this joyful resilience that Sagittarius is known for. And really, it's going to be improving in many ways with Jupiter going into your ninth house, where Leo is, where currently Venus is, and giving you a trinal, more flowing experience of what is possible for you. And that will feel more comfortable for you, more inspired, more progressive, more yourself, let's say. But in the meantime, that is part of what is informing this whole story of the moment around healing and looking deeply at wounding, looking deeply at family trauma, looking deeply at what is secret, what has been kept from you, what has not been revealed. Mercury is going to retrograde there. So you're going to have a lot of opportunities to really examine these different things that are very much about your relationship to how you have been feeling, how you've been relating, how your intimate life is going, how your psychological or emotional health is. And Chiron going through the sixth house will be like, okay, here we go. This is important now. This needs attention. This is where we put a lot of that effort. You are one of these signs where you can start to embody the role of healer, Chiron in the sixth house. This is the discovery chart. You have if you especially if you are a Sagittarius rising, it's the discovery chart for Chiron, and so you're carrying this energy of healing very, very strongly in you, and especially so if you are part of that generation from like 76 to 83, 84, and you carry Chiron in this sixth house, but especially in the early sort of 76, 77 cycle. So this can be very personal to you, and you recognize some skills that you've worked through, things that you've learned, and how you've learned to overcome, and the healing that can come from that, and the way that you can demonstrate that. So Sagittarius is naturally a teacher. It's the way you are. It's the natural insight. It's the fact that Aquarius is on your third house and you think you know it all. That's part of that. But you also have this Chironic teaching, which is about teaching through understanding and healing, teaching through the difficulty, not teaching facts and figures, not knowing stuff, but actually the fact that you've been there, done that, and you recognize how impactful that is, not only on your own life, but on the life of humans, being human, Venus is ruling your sixth house. Venus is the ruler of Taurus, where we find Chiron all these 7 years. She's currently ruling Mars also, who's also in your sixth house. And she's in the ninth house of spirit or God and the vision that you have for life. Why am I alive? Why am I doing what I do? What do I believe? What do I have faith in? And so part of this is also going to be that dynamic of what you have faith in. Venus is opposing the third house, opposing Pluto in your third house of the intensity around your opinions and stuff. And having that Pluto there is shaking up what you thought you knew, shaking up what is true, what it means to speak the truth, the impact of being truthful. I mentioned in the introduction Caroline Myss, and one of the other things that she says, I followed her for decades now, and one of the really strong messages that I learned through her is the necessity to be honest, to be truthful, and that honesty is with reference to yourself first and foremost. So being honest, being open, being truthful is not blurting out the truth in that Aquarian way without feeling what it might feel like to receive the information, but it's about being honest with yourself first and foremost. And here, I think that's a big lesson with Chiron coming into the sixth house, where you really say, you know what, I need whatever. I need to sleep more. I need to work less. I need to chill out. I need to ask for things in a way that is more sincere and not pretend I'm happy when I'm not. This is another, the shadow side of Sagittarius is pretending that everything's fine, pretending that you're happy, being chipper, being the one that raises everybody else up and, uplifts the mood and so on, when actually you really need to sit down and have a good cry. So all of this is pointing to all of those things, which is part of what you've been going through anyway, with Uranus going through the sixth and the Jupiter going through the eighth for quite a while. So Uranus, it's been the last 7, 8 years, but also Jupiter has been over a year now in your eighth house, your ruler, and ruling your North Node in the fourth, which is about your emotional and psychological security and your even material security. So you've been through a lot, and now with Chiron going in there, it's about understanding the healing that comes from the pain, that comes from the suffering. And this, again, if this is your Chiron return, you're looking at that as a life lesson. It's a big picture of what that has meant for you. Uranus is in your seventh house of relationship, and it's squaring the North Node and South Node, which are in your fourth and 10th house, which are about to change. That's a separate video. And the moon, if you look at the introduction, the moon was with the South Node at the time of this ingress and squaring exactly partile square to Uranus. So something about the way that you show up, your expectations, or your feeling around your social status, your marriage, your work, or your career ambitions, or your just personal ambitions, the way you want people to notice you, to be remembered by people, or what you want to contribute and the legacy that you want to leave. There's been a lot of shifting around that dynamic. These last few days, this period of time, and this is emphasized by the moon passing through at the time that Chiron is moving into your sixth house. The moon is the exaltation ruler of your sixth house. And so that trine is suggesting that this part of this, whatever needs to be shed in the 10th house, could it be your image? Could it be the way people see you or the way that you wanted to be seen? And you're recognizing, oh, wait, no, actually, no more of that. Or I see how I was chasing something that was somebody else's story, or I see where I have been holding myself back. And that has been a feeling of, being held back and not being seen. And here you start to get to this place where you're much more clear and true to yourself. And so Chiron going through your sixth house will be an opportunity for you to learn not only about yourself, but also about your values in terms of how your every minute is spent. How do you spend your mornings? How do you build a routine? How do you eat? What is the stuff that goes in your mouth? Is that good for you? Is it bad for you? Are there issues around drugs? Mars is in your sixth house, ruling the 12th house. Are there issues around what you consume in a way that may not be good for you? Um, is it about consuming information, or is it about consuming stuff, matter, etc.? Is there a deprivation of any of that? And all of these things are there for your healing. It can be a very busy time in terms of your own progress towards healing, but you can again become known for your role as a healing agent or a literal healer, hands-on healing, or massage therapy, or even psychological stuff, especially because Jupiter, your ruler, is with Mercury in the eighth house at the time of this ingress. And Venus, very high-minded in your ninth house, is showing you that there's more to life than the everyday schlepping. So this can be a new era for you that shows you a whole different way to live your life, more in alignment with your values. All the more so if this is your Chiron return. If it is, and you'd like to join me for a workshop on Chiron ingressing Taurus, or even if you have Chiron at the end of Aries, because it's still very relevant now until April, please join me, and all the information is below this video. You'll be able to sign up there, and if you can't join us in person, you can watch the recording. So if I don't see you there, then I will see you in the next video. Bye for now. Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Chiron is in your fifth house of your sense of what makes you happy, how you express happiness, how you express joy, fun, romance, how you bond with your children, how you think about children. Do you want them? Are they a pain in the neck? Are they out of the house? Are they only just nesting? Have they come back? What is it? And this can be part of that relational dynamic. So it's about expressing something of yourself. It's trinal now to you. So Chiron has been squaring your sign, which is a little more testy. And in the fourth house of your emotions and what makes you feel sort of connected to your roots or lineage. And that may have brought up some early childhood pain, early childhood wounding, especially if you had Chiron in Aries. And we're going through your Chiron return. This is certainly where your ruler is still working on that fourth house stuff, restructuring the foundation of your life, where Chiron is saying, you know what, you might need a break. What if you had fun? What if you actually sat down? This is the thing with Capricorn is that this feeling of always being switched on, feeling guilty if you're not. And Chiron going through the fifth house can also be that release and can give you a real healing opportunity to actually get to know what it feels like to have fun, get to know the value of enjoyment, the value of laughter, the value of a hobby, the value of connecting with your children, of producing something that feels like a baby. It can be a project that's an art project or a business, an entrepreneurial project, and that can also have this quality of deep healing. Um, if it's about love relationship, then this can also be healing a dynamic around allowing yourself to receive love. Remember, this is a receptive energy. Taurus is a receptive energy. Do I allow myself to feel loved? Do I allow myself to feel worthy of love? Um, Mars is your exaltation ruler, and it's in the fifth house there in Taurus with this Chiron, and both of them are ruled by Venus in the eighth house of intimacy in Leo. And so there's something there that's quite interesting in and of itself, because you have a lot of energy here that can be sexual or romantic, maybe even financial. We're talking about Capricorn, so maybe financial in terms of investments, in terms of like progressing through a project. Venus is in the eighth house of other people's money, as well as intimacy, what you share with others. Is it money? Is it bodily fluids? Whatever that is in the eighth house. And then the Mars, your exaltation ruler in the fifth house, can be a little horny, can be interesting in terms of passion, love affair, and so on. But whatever that is going to have a quality of healing and quality of overcoming something, a quality of wondering, is this possible? Is this available to me? This Mars also is the ruler of your fourth house of home, as I mentioned, as well as your 11th house of the future. So whatever this represents to you can also be something that you're considering quite deeply, because Mars is ruling Saturn, your ruler at this time. And Venus is trining Neptune from your eighth to your fourth. So there may be something here that's like, do I dare dream? Do I dare? Is there something holding me back? What is it? Do I feel responsible for something? Do I feel anchored to something? Can I let myself pull up the anchor and go? Mars in the fifth makes you quite competitive as well. You can be even, it can be as banal as recognizing, you know what, got to get jogging, got to get out there, find a new sport, find a team to play in, and start training, find a new hobby. Um, Capricorn is not one of the great hobbyists because they're so focused on obligations and what they need to do. And often only later in life do they start having fun. Um, and so Capricorn is like this reverse aging thing, where it's kind of like serious up right through till basically the Chiron return. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh, wait, I'm going to die soon. I might as well enjoy this. And so this might be your story right now, especially if you are in the midst of your Chiron return, where you're starting to recognize, hang on a minute, I never did get to kind of do that thing. And I never did really enjoy most of the last few decades. So what if I just started enjoying that right now? And again, if you're in your 50s already, you will have passed by that. But that's part of this particular energy too. Um, and then Mars in the fifth house can be incredibly creative in terms of business opportunities. And you do have the North Node in your third house, ruled by Jupiter in your seventh house, both of which are also connected to business. Pluto's in your house of money, your house of self-worth, your house of the family, everything you value, your values, which are changing over these last 3 years, and how you're relating to all of that stuff is changing. And it's in opposition to Venus in your eighth house. So something about shared resources, how money is controlled or spent in your relationship. For Capricorn, these are fixed signs. So this is why money is so much a focus. Saturn rules your second house, lots of care and attention given to money. And this is, again, maybe an opportunity for you to recognize that there may be a personal cost to being too much focused on the material stuff of life at your own expense, meaning that you can't really fully embrace life because you're too worried about what's coming down the future or what is available to you or issues around that. And so the fifth house, again, with the Chiron there, you may start to feel this sense of lack, maybe worrying a little bit more about taking risks. Or taking risks and then learning the lessons of taking risks with Chiron in the fifth, whether that's a romantic risk or literally a financial risk, either way. Um, Venus is ruled by the sun in your sixth house, and the nodes are squaring with the moon originally. This now we've moved the chart so much to get Capricorn here that the moon is no longer conjoining the south node that was a day before. And but the moon and the south node were exactly squaring, or at least the moon was exactly squaring Uranus, and the nodes are still squaring Uranus at this time from your ninth and your third houses. So there's a choice point here that has a lot to do with changing your everyday life. And the sun, that is the ruler of Venus, is also really reflecting on that work, everyday habits, what is necessary to do every day. And Mercury is ruling your sixth house and also ruling your ninth house of your purpose and your vision for what you're alive for. And Mercury is about to retrograde in your seventh house. So this can have, again, a reference to marriage or love, the dynamic of partnership in a general sense, which has been a part of the story of Jupiter going through your seventh. That's been helpful for you in so many ways. A lot of focus on your marriage, a lot of focus on business partnership, a lot of focus on how you can work with other people. Venus from your house of other people's money is ruling your 10th as well of your career, as well as your fifth house. So there's something here to do with work and career, which has been a big story anyway for Capricorn, but it just reemphasizes the point at this time. So this is maybe where you start to realize, oh, wait, I can have fun. I can actually enjoy life, or I can have more romance in my life and take advantage of that. Especially with Venus in a trine to Neptune, which can be very romantic. It's around the time of this ingress, but it kind of imprints the story, let's say, for the next 3 months. What if I think I've covered it all for you, Capricorn. If you want to know more about Chiron in Taurus, I'm going to do a webinar at the end of the month, and you're very welcome to join. And if you can't join, there will be a recording, and especially so if this is your return, your Chiron return. If you're age 49 to 51, or if you've already had it in Aries, it'll still be relevant because we're going back into Aries. Chiron will go back into your fourth house until April next year, and then come back fully into your fifth house. I'll do another video about that later on. But you might be interested even in a general sense of the notion of Chiron in Taurus and what that's going to involve, or how it might be impacting by square or opposition or trine or whatever your natal Chiron. So all of these things will be there in this webinar, details below, or in the pinned comment, the first comment in the section below this video. I think I've said it all for you, Capricorn. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next video. Aquarius, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. This is going to be happening in your fourth house of your home, your property, what grounds you, where your roots are, your family, your lineage, your sort of connection to your childhood or your childhood home or your mother. And all of these things will be coming up. So this can be very emotional. It can be emotional healing. It can be healing through a psychological issue or things that have come up into your awareness or that will come into your awareness with Chiron here. So Uranus has been in your fourth house, creating perhaps a bit of a stir, maybe shaking up your relationship with family, relationship to your mother, your relationship to home and where you live or what home feels like. And now Chiron goes through there and it deepens the quality of healing around these things. So it's not as unnerving as or unstable as Uranus. It will be much more quiet. It will be much more about overcoming stuff that you may not have been able to access before. The fourth house is like a secret place. It's like your hidden dreams. It's the things that you don't divulge to people. It's when you go home from work and you close the door and you put your pajamas on. That's the fourth house. And that's where you start to learn stuff about yourself, maybe even also through remembering things from childhood or things that happen again, recurring things that are happening through old patterns. It's also your foundation for happiness or psychological well-being. And that might be something that you need to work on and recognize I've been not feeling happy, or I'm recognizing why I'm not feeling happy. And as my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, says, we always have what we need to be happy. It's always available. Because when we recognize that it's never about the outer circumstances, then we can always turn within and say, oh yeah, I'm still breathing. I'm alive, and life is happening through me. It's not separate from me. I'm here in a creative enterprise called life. And especially because now you've got Uranus in your fifth house, trinal to the Pluto in your first house, you've got a lot of expressive creative energy, and that Chiron in the fourth can help you recognize where there may be something that has been cut off from your inner self, like your self acceptance, or a feeling of not having been loved enough, or a feeling of not having really had your value acknowledged or reinforced as a child, for example, or even with reference to yourself, or this can be quite literal. It can be about home and where you live, your homeland. There may be some healing around your homeland. Did you have to emigrate? Did you have to go away? Did you run away? And can you make peace with what home feels like? So this can also be quite literal. You might decide, now I need to renovate, I need to move, I need to do something different to access what home is to me, including your inner home. Venus is ruling your fourth house from the seventh, and she's opposing Pluto in your first house. So there's some relational dynamic that's part of this. It's quite nice having Venus in the seventh, because often you meet people who are quite agreeable, or they're helpful to you, or you feel like you're drawn to them, they're drawn to you in some way. There can be some power struggles because of the Pluto dynamic. That again is up to you to relate to that power from the inside, as opposed to feeling like everything has to be wrestled to the ground. You recognize where your inner power is, and Chiron will help you with this. So Chiron, when it's squaring Pluto from your fourth to your first house even, that will be a major life transformation. We'll see that later. That's in 2027. Big change happening. And all the more so, again, if this is your Chiron return, you will have already gone through that. But this is big life change. big shifting patterns, especially in the foundations of your life. Um, and and then of course we also had the moon. So this is now, I've moved the chart forward to get Aquarius here, but on the first house for Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, but the moon was exactly with the south node at the time of the ingress. So the moon was in a partile square to Uranus. You'll see that in the introduction. Uranus is your modern ruler. I work with Saturn. So if you want to use Uranus, this makes it even more meaningful. But the dynamic, in fact, for Chiron, it's very interesting for Aquarius because Chiron is working between Saturn and Uranus. So Chiron is actually quite evocative for Aquarius. Um, and the fact that the nodes are still squaring Uranus and the moon was squaring Uranus from your eighth house, second house axis, this can also be very much to do with intimacy, with money, with what resources are available for you, with love. Uranus in your fifth house of love, happiness, self-expression, creative expression, all of that stuff is a part of this moment in time as Chiron is ingressing the fourth. So big change coming through who you are in so many ways. I mean, that's been what Pluto has been building up really for the last 3 years. So it's just kind of this crescendo moment now. Chiron squaring yourself is more demanding, let's say. It's going to show you things that you'll be tested on. It's going to be saying, are you showing up for yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you nurturing yourself? That's that fourth house way of self-care, being careful with yourself. Jupiter is with Mercury in your sixth house, and the moon that was with the south node in your eighth house was ruling that, and vice versa with the Mercury. And so there's something here where this might be about marriage or intimacy or money and resources that you get from someone else, including a client, for example. And it's about what you contribute, perhaps, or what you have to do. What are the obligations and duties and things that you have to overcome every day in your sixth house way, in that way of taking care of all the nitty-gritty stuff. Um, and with Mercury going retrograde, Mercury is very slow at this time. It's going to retrograde from 26 degrees. It doesn't meet Jupiter, although they're broadly conjoined, but they don't actually perfect the conjunction till they get into Leo. And so Mercury is going to be retrograding through your sixth house again. And there's going to be a lot about your everyday life or your health that is showing up once again. So part of your health picture, let's say, is to reflect on your level of happiness. What do I need to be happy? Like, do I hate my job? But I tell myself it's the only way I can make money. Do I constantly look after everybody else and I'm exhausted? Whatever the thing is, Mercury retrograde is going to help you understand that. And that's going to be a reference back to Chiron in your fourth house. So take this Chiron as a real deep message because it's also taking you over the next 7 years to a place of deeper grounding. It's like a foundation of well-being. It's a foundation of self-care. It's like a foundation of healing, whatever is deep buried inside for you. Quite a really important transit for you, I think. And then your relational dynamic is part of this bigger change, not only because Venus is there opposing Pluto, but also we're on the cusp of like 5 weeks away from the nodal shift, where the south node moves into your seventh and the north moves into your first. For the true node, it's on the 27th of July. I'll do another video on that. And so this is preparatory. It's leading you into that new thing. Venus is also in a trine to Neptune. And that's from the seventh house to the third house. It can be about enjoyment, having fun. But with Neptune in the third house, and especially as Saturn is there too, wagging its finger, you need to be in integrity in relationships. You need to be speaking with integrity. Saturn is your ruler. You need to be committing with integrity. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to be in a place of clarity around communication. This is a big part of the Chiron journey that you've already had through the third house. This could be about siblings. It could be about also extended family issues or about friends in general, your early childhood in particular. But also, especially the third house is choice and using your willpower and making changes that are necessary. So it's really important not to be in a situation where you feel like you might be deceiving yourself. Are you lying to yourself? Are you deceiving others? Are you hearing things and then repeating back something that's not entirely what you heard because you don't like what you heard? So these are potentials there for Aquarius. I think we've said it all. There's so much more, but it'll come in different videos because we've been here quite a while at this point. And I will see you in the next video. So by the way, I am, especially if you're going to have your Chiron return right now, or if you're in the middle of it, or you've just had it, or you will be having it. I'm doing a webinar on Chiron in Taurus, and all the details are below this video. So in the first pinned comment and in the description box below, do sign up if you want to join us. It's at the end of the month, and it will be recorded if you can't join. All right, I'm in Europe, so sometimes people are not able to wake up at 3 in the morning or whatever it is. Fair enough. And so you're very welcome to join. If you cannot join, there is a recording, and otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Bye for now. Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. So Chiron is moving into the third house for Pisces, and this is going to be very connected to sibling issues, to your extended family in general. It can be the third house has a lot to do with your local space, your neighbors, your neighborhood. You just had Uranus moving through there, so there's been a lot of shifting around all of those things. But the third house is also your willpower and what you take action on. It's also your way of communicating, how you communicate, and the way that you've expressed yourself, which will have changed dramatically since 2018 because of Uranus. And now with Chiron, there can be issues that you're dealing with that are much more oriented towards healing and understanding things. Um, Maybe there's something here where there's a feeling of being not heard, restricted around being listened to, or the words that you choose, for example, how you want to express yourself. There can be, again, because it's a very practical house, the third house, and a very social house, there can be relational dynamics which become very healing for you, or you find yourself in a location that meets your needs to be much more healing for you, or the way that you're working, because third house can also be things like platforms, internet, teaching dynamics, learning skills as well. You may be learning a healing dynamic, a healing skill, for example. That would not be terribly foreign to Pisces. And equally, Venus, which is your exaltation ruler, is ruling Chiron, and she's in the sixth house of your everyday life, your health, it's a house of illness in principle, health habits, things that are obstacles to overcome, dealing with things that need to be looked at, the rhythm of work, the quality of work, the things that might be challenging in terms of colleagues or employees, if you have that. And so Venus is ruling from the sixth house, and it's Venus that is ruled by the sun in your fourth house, because the sun rules Leo, and it's Mercury in your fifth house, which is ruling the sun, as well as Uranus, which is also in Gemini. So that dynamic is pulling all of these houses together from your third house of communication and how you express yourself. Well, we have to include the second even. So that from the second right through to the sixth house in your chart, these are foundational to how you set yourself up, how you ground yourself or establish something as a reliable, hopefully, foundation for your life, with reference to money, with reference to skills that you're going to develop, especially Mars in the third is really fantastic for developing skills, teaching skills, developing something that is practical, workable. And then also with Mercury and Jupiter in your fifth house, very creative in a trine, meaning a supportive aspect to you. Also, Jupiter being your ruler and ruling the North Node that's still in your first house, there can be an enormous burst of creative flow, or an awareness of what you want to do, how you want to do it, an expression that is going to be something you can reflect on over the Mercury retrograde. So it's not to say that the Mercury retrograde will undo it, but rather you get the message, you get the vision, you get the intuition, and Mercury retrograde says, okay, now I have to go back here and fix this and do it this way and revise and do all those different things. Venus is in a trine to Neptune from the sixth house back to the second house. Neptune is in your house of money, resources, family. Neptune can represent things like disillusionment, illusion, loss, not seeing very clearly. So things around money are to be taken seriously, and especially if it's connected to your everyday work or expenditures on health matters, expenditures on things that you might have to take care of. That's not that you shouldn't do that. It's just to say that might be part of what's connecting you there to this potential for struggle. Financial struggle can be seen also with this Saturn here in the second. And and this can also be something to do with a recognition of your values, much more spiritual than even before Pisces, which is saying a lot, and how that is impacting your everyday work and how you recognize, yes, it's a kind of all in or all out, and this connects you much more spiritually to your values. Neptune can be very much idealistic, overly so potentially, and Venus can be also, very optimistic and wanting to be seen in a particular way. So that would be something just to notice. It's very brief. It's temporary, but it is the flavor of this ingress because it's in the ingress chart. And so just to be aware of that you're still keeping yourself grounded. That's actually not such a bad thing about having the Chiron in the third because it makes you keep coming back to something real and grounded, and healing through that, healing through communication and your everyday activity, because that's third house. Your schedule and the way that you conduct yourself throughout the day and the stuff that you do, like brushing your teeth and all this stuff, you take care of yourself with in the sixth house is part of the dynamic here of the Chiron in the third house, which is like, how do you conduct yourself day to day? What's your day-to-day sort of rhythm? What's the do you drop off the kids and then go for coffee, or do you go and play golf? Do you have a workout routine? Do you teach? What is the thing, the third house? And this can also connect you to that vision or the dream that is part of the Neptune here, but without making it a little like too pie in the sky. I think overall there's a little risk of that in the sense that Saturn is still firmly in the second house for another year and a bit, year and a half or more, alas, more. So just to say that that's part of the signature, so something to point out. Um, yeah, and then in terms of this, I'm not really pointing this out to many people, but in terms of this being your house of self-worth and being, Chiron in Taurus having that symbolism very strongly as well. So Aries is also squaring Jupiter, which is your ruler, as well as Mercury, and that's going to be several days like that. It already has been for Jupiter, it's been well over a week. And for Mercury, that will come back because Mercury is retrograding away and then coming back to that. But it's pretty much at the degree that Mercury will station. So within a degree of Mercury's station, there's going to be a square back to Eris. And Eris in your second house is speaking to a feeling of not being seen or not being valued, not being honored, or not, and here's the kicker, it's where you haven't done it yourself, or where you've been hypocritical about money, or where you've been hypocritical about your own values, or about your own like worth. What is worth it to me? What is the worth of things? This Chiron is broadly squared by Pluto, and then of course we have the opposition from Pluto to Venus in a very broad T-square with Chiron that she's ruling. So eventually, as we get forward into 2027 and even beyond, there's going to be a pretty broad square ongoing between Chiron and Pluto, much more strongly felt next year, but worth pointing out here because that will be a life changer in terms of your speech and the way that you make choices and the way that you show up and make decisions. The third house is very connected to how you teach, and Chiron is also about teaching or how you learn. And Chiron also is about learning through getting the message, as it were, learning through healing. There can be a dynamic of healing around siblings or healing around the family. healing around cousins, friends, friendships of all kinds. So the moon and south node were very strongly squaring Uranus. The nodes are still squaring Uranus from your first to seventh house, where, self and other, into the fourth house of your foundation and what makes you feel secure psychologically, emotionally, financially, physically, tangibly. Where do I live? What is the property, etc., all that stuff. And and so we have this, the moon has moved on simply because I've kept turning the dial to get to Pisces, but the moon was at 3 degrees exactly squaring Uranus. So there's some change in relationships, in relational dynamics, in the dynamic between you and another that is significant at this time. The moon is the exaltation ruler of Taurus, your third house, and that was trining from your seventh to Chiron. And anyway, Chiron is still very much all through these next 3 months trining the south node as part of the signature of the next few months. And so there's something that needs to be let go of also in the dynamic of relating or clients, business, the other, how you show up for the other. You have just another 10 days or so left of Jupiter, your ruler, in your fifth house of self-expression, which is trinal to you and bringing you a lot of happiness, a lot of expansion, a lot of blessings through your children or for your children, in the relationship with your children. For example, I was just a few days in Paris seeing my daughter. That's one of the reasons I didn't do a video last week. So it was wonderful because I saw her in March around my birthday. So I have a Pisces stellium, including a sun, and um and I just saw her now for a few days, which was just one-on-one time, and it was so valuable and so important. And she's a Pisces as well, and it was incredibly enriching, incredibly valuable, and healed a lot of things there. And so this can also be part of this journey with your own children for Pisces, or it can be about children. Do I want children? And of course, the fifth house can also be about love in general, how you receive or give love, about lovers, projects, your creative insights, all that stuff is fifth house dynamics. And Jupiter also rules your 10th house of social status, career, vocation, your way of expressing your personal ambitions, your social ambitions, all those things. So very favorable time in general, and the Chiron in the third can help you heal through your way of communicating with others or your way of connecting on an everyday level with others. It's a sextile to Pisces, so it's favorable. It's an easier flow than some other signs are getting, but still very important. And I think it can have something to do, again, if this is your Taurus Chiron return, it will 100% have something to do with your early childhood and your siblings. And so if you're interested in going to a webinar with me, at the end of the month, I'm going to do a webinar on the Chiron return into Taurus and Chiron in Taurus in general, and including even Chiron in Aries for those who've just gone through that or are still going through that because it continues till next April. We will look at that, and we will look at also even other aspects between Chiron and other signs, squares, oppositions, trines, and so on. And if you're interested, all the description is below this video, where you find other information always about me and about the videos and stuff like that, and also in the pinned comment, the first comment pinned below. So do join me, and if you can't, I will see you then in the next video. So bye for now.